Welcome, friends. Tonight we drift back to a time when the world seemed to hold its breath. A time not just of sirens and shadows, but of quiet mornings, rationed tea, and small, ordinary acts of survival. This is not a story of generals or armies. There are no battlefield commands here, no maps spread across polished tables. These are the slow stories, the ones lived by ordinary people who woke up each day wondering what the sky might bring. Imagine a cold flat in wartime London, where the clink of a teacup offers more comfort than words. Or a village in occupied France where someone laces up their boots for a day of silence and watchful glances. Picture a child hiding in an attic, listening to the creaks of the floor above. Somewhere else, a shipyard worker wipes sweat from his brow, unaware the war will be over in 2 more years. They were not heroes. They were simply living, and that, in those years, was heroic enough. Watered-down soups, muddy boots, handwritten letters, quiet music from radios crackling under blackout curtains. These were the moments that filled the hours, and though they rarely appear in textbooks, they speak of something deeper, a kind of courage made of patience, habit, and hope. Tonight, we'll walk with them. We'll follow the rhythms of daily life, step by step, hour by hour, from cities bombed to rubble, to farms blanketed in snow, through factories, soup lines, village schools, and quiet shelters. We won't rush. There's no need to. These were slow days, long ones, worn gently by people who waited, worked, and carried on. So find your quiet. Let the weight of the day fall from your shoulders. Breathe in slow and soft, and join us as we listen to the lives of those who lived in the shadow of the Second World War, not through gunfire, but through the simple act of getting through one more day. This is what did people do all day during World War II and more. Welcome to the journey. A British civilian's day during the Blitz. The day does not begin with the sun, but with the silence that follows the sirens. A long, mournful note, the all clear, echoes through the gray London streets, a sound more welcome than any birdsong. In a small terraced house in Islington, the air is cool and smells of dust and damp earth from the Anderson shelter in the back garden. The first task is not to make tea, but to emerge, blinking, into the pale light of dawn. The world feels muted, covered in a fine layer of brick dust and soot. One must check the house first, a slow, methodical walk through the few small rooms. Are the windows intact? Often they're not, the glass long gone, replaced with wooden boards or thick fabric that ripples in the breeze. The delicate task is sweeping up the fresh plaster that has fallen from the ceiling, a fine white powder that settles on the furniture like a layer of snow. The real damage is assessed from the street, a quick glance up and down the row of familiar houses. Is Mrs. Higgins' roof still there? Has the corner shop, with its ever-dwindling supply of tinned goods, survived another night? There is a quiet, communal sigh of relief when the familiar shapes are all present, even if they are a little more scarred than they were yesterday. Then, the kettle goes on the gas ring. The water is precious, and so is the gas. The flame is kept low. The tea is weak, the same leaves used for the second or third time, but the warmth is what matters. It is a ritual of normalcy, a small act of defiance against the chaos of the night. Toast, if there was bread left on the ration, is scraped with a thin layer of margarine. The wireless is switched on, its valves humming to life. The calm, reassuring voice of a BBC announcer reads the morning news. The reports are clinical, speaking of enemy aircraft engaged over the coast, of raids on industrial targets. The language is careful, designed to inform without causing panic. But everyone knows the truth. They heard the industrial targets last night. They felt the earth shake. They know a target can be a factory, but it can also be the street next to theirs. While the radio murmurs, the day's preparations begin. Filling the flasks with hot water or tea for the shelter later, checking the gas masks, their rubbery smell a constant, unpleasant reminder. Ensuring the blackout curtains are perfectly in place for the coming evening, not a single chink of light to betray their presence to the sky. The journey to work is a landscape of contrasts. On one street, children might be playing a game of kick the can, their shouts echoing with a cheerful innocence. On the next, a silent crowd gathers around a fresh crater, the raw red earth of London's clay exposed to the sky. A building that stood yesterday is now a mountain of rubble. Its inner life, a floral wallpaper, a tilted fireplace, a single unbroken picture frame, spilled out for all to see. Wardens in their tin helmets move with a weary purpose, directing the curious away, their faces smudged with soot and fatigue. There is no hysteria, only a grim, determined sense of continuation. The bus arrives, maybe a few minutes late, its windows crisscrossed with adhesive tape to prevent shattering. The passengers sit quietly, strangers bonded by a shared experience. They do not speak of the fear, but of the practicalities, the price of carrots, the latest ration book allowances, a rumor of a new shipment of powdered eggs. Work itself is an island of routine in a sea of uncertainty. In an office, the typewriters clatter on, their rhythm a counterpoint to the distant sound of construction or demolition. In a shop, the shelves are organized and reorganized, making a sparse inventory look as full as possible. Conversations are quiet, punctuated by the passing of a military convoy or the wail of a distant ambulance. There is a sense of shared responsibility, a feeling that to carry on with one's small mundane job is to contribute to a much larger effort. Lunch is a simple affair, eaten at a desk or in a nearby park if the weather allows. A sandwich of national loaf bread, dense and gray, with perhaps a filling of grated vegetables and a dab of relish. One might watch the barrage balloons, the great silver elephants of the sky, floating serenely overhead. They're a comforting sight, a silent promise of defense. The afternoon brings a subtle change in the atmosphere. As the light begins to fade, a collective tension settles over the city. The workday ends not with a sense of relief, but with a quiet urgency to get home before the darkness and what the darkness might bring. The journey home is a race against the setting sun. The streets empty quickly. The world becomes a place of deep shadows and faint outlines. Inside the house, the small rituals of the evening begin under the dim glow of a low wattage bulb. The blackout curtains are checked again. Dinner is cooked, a creative endeavor born of necessity. Woolton pie, a concoction of root vegetables, becomes a staple. Potatoes are used in every conceivable way. The meal is eaten together, the family gathered around the table. Their world shrunk to this small circle of light. Afterwards, there might be a game of cards or the mending of clothes. Socks are darned and redarned until the original wool is barely visible. A new novel from the library is read aloud. These are moments of precious, guarded peace. And then it begins again. The low, rising wail of the air raid siren. It is not a sound of panic anymore, but a signal for action. There is no rush, only a methodical sequence of movements. The fire is damped down, the flasks and blankets are gathered, the cat is coaxed into its carrier. The family files out into the cool night air and down the 3 steps into the Anderson shelter. The air inside is cold and damp, smelling of earth and metal. They settle onto the narrow bunks, wrapping themselves in blankets. From inside this metal womb, the war becomes a thing of sound. The distant, rhythmic drone of the bombers, the un-siren, as it's called, the sharp crack of the anti-aircraft guns in the nearby park, and then the whistles and the crumps, A soft thud far away, a heavier one that shakes the ground and makes the earth tremble, sending a fine shower of dirt from the ceiling. They do not speak. They listen. They wait. They endure. Sometimes someone hums a quiet tune. Sometimes a child whimpers and is soothed. They are simply waiting for the silence and for the long, beautiful note of the all clear that will allow them to emerge and begin another day. A German housewife in Berlin, 1942. The morning in the Berlin apartment begins before the sun, in a silence that is heavy and watchful. The air is cold. Coal is too precious to burn through the night. The first task for the hausfrau is to coax the stove to life, feeding it with a few carefully chosen briquettes. As the small kitchen slowly warms, she prepares the day's first meal. The coffee is not coffee, but ersatz, a bitter brew made from roasted acorns or barley, its scent a constant reminder of the blockades and the endless war. The bread is dark and dense, rationed by the gram. Each slice is cut with precision, a small, careful act of mathematics. A thin scraping of margarine, perhaps a sliver of sausage if the ration cards allowed for it this week. Her husband, a clerk in a municipal office, eats quickly and quietly, his face etched with a permanent low-level anxiety. He reads the Völkischer Beobachter, the official party newspaper, its headlines proclaiming glorious victories on the Eastern Front. But his eyes betray a weariness that the bold black print cannot dispel. They do not speak of the war, not really. They speak of the leaky faucet, of their son's progress in the Hitlerjugend, of the need to mend a coat. To speak of doubt, of fear, is a luxury they cannot afford. A neighbor could be listening. The walls themselves seem to have ears. After her husband leaves, her day of work begins. It is a day of endless calculations, of stretching insufficiency into sustenance. First is the trip to the shops. The queue is the central institution of her life. She stands in line for bread, for potatoes, for anything that might be available. The women in the queue trade rumors in hushed tones. A shop on the next street is said to have received a shipment of apples. Another might have soap. They trade tips on how to make a soup from vegetable peelings, how to turn a threadbare sheet into dishcloths. Their faces are a study in stoic patience. Their shopping bags, or Einkaufsnetz, mostly empty. They carry their ration books everywhere, a complex web of stamps and coupons that dictates their existence. A missing stamp is a small catastrophe. Getting to the front of the queue only to find the promised item is gone is a quiet, soul-crushing defeat. She learns to read the faces of the shopkeepers, to know by the slump of their shoulders if the journey was in vain. Back in the apartment, the real alchemy begins. The meager purchases are laid out on the kitchen table. The challenge is to create a midday meal that seems substantial, that feels like home. Potatoes are the foundation of everything. Boiled, fried, mashed, grated into pancakes. Turnips and cabbage are her other constant companions. Meat is a memory, a ghost that haunts the dinner table on holidays if they are lucky. She cooks with a quiet intensity, wasting nothing. The water used to boil potatoes will be the base for a soup. Stale bread crusts are saved to thicken a sauce. Her movements are economical, practiced, a dance of conservation. While the soup simmers, she works. Mending is a constant task. Her husband's socks, her own dress, the children's clothes. She turns collars on shirts, patches elbows on jackets, lets down hems until there is no more fabric to give. The rhythmic push and pull of the needle is a kind of meditation, a small, controllable act in a world that is spiraling out of her control. In the afternoon, there might be a knock on the door. It could be the block warden, a party official who lives in the building, making sure her blackout curtains are in order or asking for donations for the Winter Relief Fund. She must smile, be polite, offer the correct greetings. She must show the portrait of the Führer that hangs in the living room. Her heart beats a little faster during these visits. A wrong word, a flicker of dissent in her eyes could be reported. Her life is a performance of loyalty. After the warden leaves, the oppressive silence of the apartment returns, broken only by the sound of her own breathing and the distant rumble of the city. She might sit by the window for a moment, looking down at the street. She sees the uniformed boys of the Hitlerjugend marching past, their faces so young and so serious. She sees the flags hanging from every building, a sea of red, white, and black. The city is a stage, and everyone is playing their part. The children return from school in the late afternoon. Her son, full of stories from his youth group meeting, recites slogans about duty and sacrifice. Her daughter, younger, is quieter, perhaps tired from the long school day and the endless drills. The mother must listen, praise the boy's enthusiasm, and help the girl with her homework. She must project an aura of calm and strength, a belief in the cause, for their sake. The evening meal is another variation on the theme of potatoes and cabbage. As they eat, they might listen to the radio. The news is always of victory, of heroic struggles and strategic withdrawals that are framed as triumphs. Then comes the music. Wagner, Beethoven, grandiose and stirring, designed to swell the heart with national pride. It is a soundtrack for a reality she does not fully recognize. She looks at her husband's face, illuminated by the dim light of the lamp, and sees the cracks in the facade. She sees the fear he tries to hide. As night falls, the city changes. The blackout is absolute. The streets become dark canyons. The fear of air raids is a constant low hum beneath the surface of life. While Berlin has not yet suffered the way British cities have, the threat is always there. The wail of the sirens is a sound they are beginning to know. When it comes, they do not have a garden shelter. They must gather their most important documents, a small bag with water and biscuits, and make their way down to the building's cellar. The air in the Luftschutzkeller is thick with the smell of damp concrete, coal dust, and the close, anxious breath of all the building's residents. They sit together in the dark, strangers and neighbors, united by a shared vulnerability. They listen to the distant thrum of the planes, the bark of the flak guns on the city's edge. They wait. In these moments, in the shared darkness, the performance of loyalty falls away. There is only the human need for the noise to stop, for the danger to pass, for the morning to come. When the all-clear finally sounds, they file back up to their apartments in silence, back to their cold beds, to try and find a few hours of restless sleep before the morning comes, and the day begins all over again.
A Soviet farmer in a Ukrainian village. The sun rises over a vast, flat expanse of black earth, the Chernozem, so rich and fertile, it seems to breathe, but the land is wounded. It is scarred by tank treads and pocked with shell craters. The village, a collection of simple wooden houses with thatched roofs, huddles together as if for warmth, though the year is turning towards summer. In one of these houses, a man named Ivan wakes. He is not old, but his face is a map of hardship, his hands thick and calloused from a lifetime of working this soil. The air in the small hut is thick with the smell of wood smoke, dried herbs, and sleep. His wife is already awake, moving silently around the earthen floor, stoking the embers in the large clay stove that dominates the room. There is no quiet conversation, only the shared language of movement and necessity. The morning meal is thin porridge, made from what little grain they were able to hide. The German occupiers have taken almost everything. The grain silos are guarded by soldiers. The livestock, the cow that gave them milk, the pigs that would have seen them through the winter, are gone, requisitioned for the Wehrmacht. Ivan's work for the day is not his own. He is no longer a farmer on a collective working for the Soviet state. He is now a laborer for the German Reich. After the porridge is gone, he walks out of the village, joining a silent procession of other men and women. They walk towards the fields, the same fields their ancestors have worked for centuries. But now, at the edge of the fields, there are German soldiers, their grey uniforms stark against the green of the new crops. They watch, rifles held loosely, as the villagers are assigned their tasks. The work is backbreaking and relentless. Today, it is weeding the endless rows of sunflowers, their heads just beginning to turn towards the sun. The sun beats down, hot and unforgiving. The only sounds are the rhythmic scrape of hoes against the earth, the rustle of leaves, the occasional sharp command from a soldier, and the buzzing of insects. The villagers work in silence. To speak is to draw attention. To rest is to risk a blow from a rifle butt. Ivan's mind is a quiet, closed-off place. He focuses on the task at hand, the feel of the wooden handle of the hoe in his hands, the way the black earth crumbles under the blade, the satisfaction of pulling a stubborn weed, its roots clinging to the soil. He thinks of the land. He knows its rhythms, its moods. He knows when it needs rain, when the sun is too harsh. He feels a deep, sorrowful connection to it, a feeling of being its custodian, even as he is forced to tend it for his enemies. He sees the German soldiers, young men, some of them barely boys, their faces already hard, or else blank with boredom. He does not feel hatred for them, not exactly. He feels a vast, weary resentment. They are a force of nature, like a blight or a drought, something to be endured. His hatred is reserved for the system that sent them, the faceless power that has stolen his food, his freedom, and his future. At midday, a whistle blows, the work stops. The villagers gather in small groups, finding shade where they can under a lone tree or in the lee of a supply wagon. They eat what they have brought, a piece of coarse black bread, a boiled potato, perhaps an onion. The water in their wooden flasks is warm and tastes of the container. Ivan sits with his back against a fence post, chewing his bread slowly, making it last. He looks out over the fields, stretching to the horizon. In the distance, he can see the faint shimmer of heat rising from the ground. He remembers a time before the war, a time of hardship under their own commissars, but a time that was at least theirs. He remembers the songs they used to sing during the harvest, the laughter, the village festivals. Now there is only this heavy, watchful silence. The only music is the drone of a German reconnaissance plane high overhead, a silver cross against the deep blue of the sky. Sometimes there are whispers, a word passed from one man to another as they stoop over the rows. A rumor of partisans in the great forest to the north. A story of a German supply train derailed. These whispers are dangerous, but they are also a form of nourishment, a small spark of hope in the darkness. They are a reminder that they are not entirely broken, that somewhere people are fighting back. Ivan listens, but he does not speak. He has a wife, a family. To be caught speaking of such things would mean a swift and brutal end. So, he holds the hope inside, a secret seed planted in the soil of his heart. In the late afternoon, the work continues. The sun begins its slow descent, casting long shadows across the fields. The German soldiers become more irritable, eager for the day to end. Finally, the whistle blows again. The villagers gather their tools and begin the long walk back to the village. Their bodies ache, their hands are raw, but they walk with a steady,
shuffling gait. They are survivors. Back in the village, the evening routine begins. Ivan might spend some time in the small garden patch behind his hut, a plot of land too small for the Germans to bother with. Here, he and his wife grow potatoes, beets, and cabbages. This small garden is their secret lifeline. It is a space that is still theirs, and they tend it with a fierce, loving care. As dusk settles, the village grows quiet. The doors are barred, the small windows are covered. To be out after curfew is to risk being shot. The family gathers round the table for the evening meal, another thin soup, perhaps with a few precious vegetables from their secret garden. The children are quiet, their faces old with the knowledge of fear. After the meal, Ivan might take out a piece of wood and a small sharp knife. He carves small figures of animals, of people, of trees. His hands, so rough and powerful in the fields, become gentle and precise. It is an act of creation in a world of destruction. It is a way of keeping his spirit from being crushed. He is not just a laborer for the invaders, he is a man who can make something beautiful from a simple piece of wood. Later, in the darkness of the hut, lying on the straw-filled mattress, he listens to the sounds of the night, the cry of a distant owl, the wind moving through the thatch of the roof. Sometimes far away, he hears a rumble. It could be thunder, or it could be the sound of artillery, the endless, grinding sound of the front, a reminder that the war is a living, breathing beast that devours everything. He closes his eyes, not in peace, but in a state of patient endurance, praying for the rain, for the harvest, and for the day that the land will be theirs again.
An American shipyard worker in California, 1943. The morning air in Richmond, California, smells of salt from the bay and the sharp, metallic tang of hot rivets. The sun is just beginning to burn through the coastal fog, casting a hazy, golden light over the sprawling landscape of the Kaiser shipyards. The day for a worker, let's call him Frank, begins with the shriek of a whistle, a sound that cuts through the dawn and calls thousands from their beds in the hastily constructed dormitories and housing projects that have sprung up around the bay. Frank is from Oklahoma, one of the countless Dust Bowl migrants who came west seeking work, and found it here, in the roaring heart of America's war machine. He pulls on his heavy denim overalls and thick work boots, his movements quick and practiced. There's no time to waste. He grabs a coffee and a donut at the bustling canteen, a place buzzing with the accents of Texas, Arkansas, and New York, a nation gathered to build ships. The walk to his assigned hull is a journey through a controlled and deafening chaos. The scale of the place is almost impossible to comprehend. As far as the eye can see, the skeletons of ships rise towards the sky in various stages of completion. Victory ships, Liberty ships, tankers. They are being built with an astonishing speed, assembled in massive prefabricated sections. The air rings with a relentless symphony of industrial noise, the deafening chatter of riveting guns, a sound like 1,000 giant woodpeckers. The deep, resonant clang of steel plates being lowered into place by massive cranes. The hiss of welding torches casting brilliant, searing blue light. And the shouts of foremen trying to be heard over the din. It is a world of movement, of purpose, of overwhelming power. Frank feels a surge of pride every time he walks through the gates. They aren't just building ships, they are building victory. His job today is on the assembly line for a double bottom, a massive section of the ship's foundation. He is a ship fitter's helper.
His task is to hold the heavy steel plates in place with giant clamps and wedges, while the welders, many of them women, Rosie the riveters in the flesh, fuse the seams together. The work is physically demanding and intensely repetitive. He lifts, he pulls, he positions, he tightens. The steel is heavy and unforgiving. A moment of inattention can mean a crushed finger or a broken toe. The sun climbs higher, beating down on the steel plates until they are hot to the touch, even through his gloves. Sweat drips down his face, stinging his eyes. The noise is so constant that it becomes a kind of silence, a background hum that he learns to tune out, focusing only on the task in front of him, on the instructions from the fitter, on the precise placement of the next piece of the puzzle. He works alongside people he would never have met back home. The man guiding the crane is a former school teacher from Ohio. The welder on his team is a young woman who was a waitress in San Diego just 6 months ago. They come from every walk of life, united by the common goal of getting the ship built. There is a sense of camaraderie born of shared labor and shared danger. They communicate in a mixture of hand signals and shouts, their faces often obscured by safety goggles and helmets. They learn to trust each other implicitly. Frank knows that the welder trusts him to hold the plate steady. He trusts the crane operator to lower the next section without crushing them all. It is a high-stakes, high-speed ballet of humans and machines. The lunch whistle provides a brief, welcome respite. The noise subsides slightly as the riveting guns fall silent. Workers find spots to sit in the shade of a massive hull, unwrapping sandwiches from wax paper. Frank sits with his crew, their faces smudged with grease and sweat. They talk about baseball scores, about a letter from a brother on the front lines in the Pacific, about the movie playing in town. They rarely talk about the immense danger of their work or the purpose of the ships they are building. The reality of war is something distant, an idea represented by the gray steel that surrounds them. Their focus is on the here and now, the deadline for this section, the next shift, the paycheck at the end of the week. The pay is good, better than anything he could have dreamed of back in Oklahoma. For the first time in his life, he has money in his pocket. He's sending some home to his family, saving some, and spending some on the simple pleasures of a night out in town. The afternoon shift is a race against the clock. The foremen push them harder, their voices more urgent. Production schedules are everything. The signs posted around the yard proclaim, "The man who relaxes is helping the axis." There is a constant pressure to work faster, to be more efficient, to shave minutes and then seconds off every task. He feels the ache in his shoulders, the strain in his back. But he also feels the momentum of the place, the incredible collective energy of thousands of people working as one. He sees the section he was working on this morning being lifted by a giant crane, a piece of a puzzle the size of a building, and swung into place on the shipway. He sees the hull of a ship that was just a keel last week, now looking like a real vessel. The progress is visible, tangible, and deeply satisfying. He is not just a laborer, he is a builder. As the afternoon wears on, the fog begins to roll back in from the bay, cooling the air and softening the harsh edges of the industrial landscape. The second shift whistle blows, signaling the end of Frank's workday. He is tired to the bone, his ears ringing from the noise. He walks back through the yard, a different man than the one who arrived in the morning. He is part of a river of men and women heading for the gates, their faces weary, but their steps steady. The second shift is already pouring in to take their place. The work never stops. The yard is alive 24 hours a day, under the sun and under the harsh glare of floodlights. Frank's evening is simple. He showers, washing away the grime of the shipyard. He eats a hot, plentiful meal in the noisy mess hall. The food is plain but abundant, a stark contrast to the rationed meals in other parts of the world. Afterwards, he might write a letter home, sitting on his bunk in the crowded dormitory. He describes the California weather, the hard work, the good pay. He doesn't describe the noise or the danger. He wants to reassure them, to let them know he is doing well. Or he might go into town with a few buddies. They'll see a movie, have a couple of beers in a loud, crowded bar. The towns around the shipyards are boom towns, full of life and energy, and the tensions that come with rapid, chaotic growth. For a few hours, he can forget about the relentless demands of the shipyard and feel like a young man with his own life. But even here, the war is present, in the uniforms of the sailors and soldiers on leave, in the patriotic songs on the jukebox, in the conversations at the bar. Later, back in his bunk, the ringing in his ears finally subsides, replaced by the low, distant hum of the shipyard, a sound that has become the lullaby of his new life. He falls into a deep, exhausted sleep, ready to wake up and do it all again tomorrow. A Jewish teen hiding in an attic in the Netherlands. The world has shrunk to the size of a few small rooms at the top of a narrow house in Amsterdam. For a teenage girl, let's call her Lena, the day begins not with light, but with the muffled sounds of the city waking up below. The gentle rumble of the first tram of the morning, the distant clang of a milkman's bottles, the footsteps of people on their way to work. These are the sounds of a life she can no longer participate in, a world she can only listen to. She lies still on her thin mattress, waiting for the signal. The signal is the sound of the bookcase below being moved, followed by 3 soft knocks. It means the people who work in the office downstairs have arrived, and the period of absolute silence must begin. From roughly 8 in the morning until 6 in the evening, she and her family must become ghosts. The attic space is cramped and dim. The only natural light comes from a single grimy skylight, which must be kept covered with a thick black cloth. The air is stale, thick with the smell of dust, unwashed bodies, and the ever-present low-level scent of fear. Lena's morning routine is a study in silence. She cannot use the toilet. A makeshift bucket in a small closet must suffice, to be emptied only at night. She cannot run water. She cannot speak above a whisper. She cannot walk, but must move in stocked feet, slowly and carefully, to avoid making the floorboards creak. Every sound is a potential betrayal. A cough must be smothered in a pillow. A sneeze is a moment of pure terror. The day is structured around the schedules of the people below, the benevolent strangers who are risking their own lives to protect them. Breakfast is a piece of dry bread and a cup of tepid water. Food is a constant obsession. They are entirely dependent on their protectors for every mouthful. They live by the ration cards of others, and they know that every bite they take is a bite that their helpers are going without. Lena eats slowly, making each crumb last. She thinks about food constantly. She remembers the taste of fresh baked bread from the corner bakery, the sweetness of an apple, the creamy texture of cheese. These memories are a form of torture, but also a connection to the life she has lost. After the silent meal, the long, empty hours of the day stretch out before her. The challenge is to fill the time, to keep her mind from unraveling in the suffocating quiet. Her education continues in whispers. Her father, a former professor, gives her lessons in history and mathematics. They huddle in a corner, their heads close together, speaking in the lowest possible tones. He uses a small slate and a piece of chalk, the soft scratching sound barely audible. She tries to focus, to learn about the ancient Romans or the principles of algebra, but it is hard to concentrate when a police siren wails in the street below, sending a jolt of ice through her veins. She reads. Books are her greatest escape. Their protectors bring them books from the library, their only window to the outside world. She devours them, losing herself in stories of adventure, romance, and faraway lands. For a few hours, she is not a girl trapped in an attic. She is a character in a novel, free to roam, to speak, to live. She keeps a diary, writing in a small, cramped hand,
pouring out her fears, her frustrations, her hopes. The diary is her only true confidant, the only place where she can be completely honest. The midday meal is brought up by one of their protectors, usually during the office workers' lunch break. It is the most dangerous time of the day. The sound of the bookcase moving, the quick, stealthy footsteps on the stairs, the hurried exchange of food and news. The protector might bring a newspaper, which they will read and reread, analyzing every word, searching for any sign of hope, any hint that the war might be turning. They learn of Allied advances, of battles far away, and they cling to these reports like a lifeline. But the news is also full of stories of roundups, of deportations, of the ever-tightening grip of the occupiers. They live on a knife's edge of hope and despair. After the protector leaves, they eat their meager lunch, often a thin soup and more bread, in silence, listening for any sign that they have been discovered. The afternoon is the hardest part of the day. The initial energy of the morning has faded, and the evening feels a long way off. The monotony is a physical weight. She might spend hours just sitting by a crack in the blackout curtain, peering at a sliver of the world outside. She sees a patch of sky, the leaves of a chestnut tree, the roof of the building across the canal. She watches the clouds move. She memorizes the pattern of the bricks on the opposite wall. She sees birds fly free, and a wave of desperate longing washes over her. She does exercises, small, silent movements to keep her muscles from atrophying. She stretches, she does squats, she moves her arms, all without making a sound. It is a small rebellion against the confinement, a way of reminding herself that she still has a body, that she is still alive. As the day wears on, the sounds from the street below change. The trams become more frequent. The footsteps quicken. It is the sound of people going home. This is the signal that their own day is about to begin. They wait, listening intently for the sound of the last office worker leaving, the front door closing and locking. Then they wait a little longer, just to be sure. Finally, the signal comes. The bookcase is moved aside, and one of their protectors calls up softly. The relief is a physical sensation, a loosening of a knot in her chest that she didn't even realize was there. They can stand up, they can stretch properly, they can talk in normal voices, they can use the lavatory. The evening is a time of relative freedom, a few precious hours of normalcy in their abnormal existence. They prepare a meal together, a chance to move around the small space, to do something purposeful. They listen to the BBC on a small, crackly radio, the volume turned down so low they have to press their ears against the speaker. The voice from London, speaking in Dutch, brings news of the free world, a message of hope that cuts through the static and the fear. After dinner, they might play a game of cards or chess. They tell stories, reminiscing about the past, trying to keep the memories of their former lives alive. But the war is always there, a silent guest at their table. A car stopping suddenly in the street below, the sound of heavy boots, a shouted command, any of these can plunge them back into a state of frozen terror. As night falls, they prepare for sleep. They unroll their mattresses, they get ready in the dim light. Lena lies in the darkness, listening to the breathing of her family around her. She hears the bells of the Westerkirk chime the hours, a steady, comforting presence in the long, dark night. She thinks about the future, a future she can barely imagine. She wonders if she will ever feel the sun on her face again, if she will ever walk down a street without fear. And then she drifts into a restless sleep to dream of a world that has been stolen from her. The day begins with the sharp, clear sound of a wooden clapper struck by the neighborhood leader, echoing through the narrow residential street in Tokyo. It is a signal for the morning assembly, a ritual of patriotism and collective spirit. A young schoolgirl, let's call her Keiko, is already dressed in her midi blouse uniform and dark pleated skirt. Her hair is in 2 neat black braids, as required. She bows to the small Shinto shrine in her family's modest wooden house, a quick, respectful gesture to the ancestors and the emperor. The house is a place of quiet order and discipline.
The paper screens are slid open to let in the cool morning air, which carries the scent of miso soup and grilling fish from her mother's kitchen. Breakfast is a simple traditional meal: rice, soup, a small piece of salted fish, and pickled vegetables. It is eaten quickly, in a respectful silence. Her father, a salaryman, reads the newspaper, his face serious as he absorbs the reports of Japan's destiny in Asia, of the heroic efforts of the Imperial Army in China. The walk to school is a lively, orderly affair. Keiko joins a group of other girls from her neighborhood. They walk in a neat column, their book bags held in front of them. The streets of their district are a mix of traditional wooden houses and more modern storefronts. Bicycles and delivery carts are more common than cars. They bow to the local policemen, to elders they pass on the street. Respect and deference are woven into the fabric of their lives. The city of Tokyo is a place of immense energy, but it is a disciplined energy, channeled towards a national purpose. Posters on the walls urge citizens to conserve resources, to work harder, to be worthy of the sacrifices being made by the soldiers. The national slogan, Hakko Ichu, or 8 crown cords, 1 roof, is everywhere, a promise of a world united under Japanese leadership. School begins not with a bell, but with the entire student body, boys and girls, assembled in the schoolyard. They stand at attention, facing east, towards the imperial palace. They bow deeply. They sing the national anthem, Kimigayo, their young voices rising in a solemn chorus. They listen to a patriotic speech from the headmaster, who reminds them of their duty to the emperor and the nation. He speaks of the importance of spirit, of endurance, of the virtues of the Yamato race. After the assembly, they perform group calisthenics, moving in perfect, synchronized unison to the commands broadcast over a loudspeaker. This is not just physical education. It is a lesson in harmony, discipline, and collective identity. The academic day is rigorous and demanding. In her classroom, Keiko sits at a simple wooden desk, her posture perfectly erect. The lessons are a blend of traditional subjects and nationalist ideology. In her ethics class, she learns about her obligations to her family, her community, and above all, the emperor, who is a living god. In history, she learns of the divine origins of Japan and its sacred mission to liberate Asia from Western colonialism. Even mathematics and science are taught with an emphasis on their practical application for the strength of the nation. There is a great deal of memorization. The atmosphere is one of serious, focused effort. Laughter is rare. Questions are for clarification, not for challenging the material. But the day is not all academic. A significant portion of the school day is now devoted to practical, war-related activities. The girls learn how to sew senenbari, or 1,000-stitch belts for soldiers. Each belt has 1,000 red French knots, each knot sewn by a different woman, a collective prayer for the soldiers' safety. Keiko sits with her classmates in a circle, their needles moving quickly, their faces intent. They learn first aid, how to bandage wounds and carry a stretcher. In the schoolyard, they practice with bamboo spears, learning how to charge and thrust, a symbolic but chilling preparation for a potential invasion of their homeland. They are taught that to die for the emperor is the greatest honor. The idea of sacrifice is not presented as a tragedy, but as a noble fulfillment of one's purpose. Lunch is a simple bento box, prepared by her mother that morning. It contains rice, a piece of cooked vegetable, and perhaps a pickled plum in the center to represent the Japanese flag. The girls eat together in their classroom, quietly and without fuss. They are encouraged to eat every single grain of rice as a sign of respect for the farmers who grew it and the soldiers who are fighting for it. Wasting food is a moral failing. During the lunch break, the girls might talk quietly among themselves. They talk about their families, about a popular song, about a handsome movie star. But even these conversations are subdued, constrained by the ever-present weight of duty and expectation. There is little room for the carefree frivolity of youth. In the afternoon, the work continues. Keiko might be part of a group assigned to tend the school's vegetable garden, cultivating potatoes and daikon radishes to supplement the nation's food supply. Or she might be part of a labor service group,
sent to a local factory for a few hours to perform simple tasks like sorting parts or packing boxes. The work is tedious, but it is presented as a vital contribution to the war effort. She is not just a schoolgirl, she is a productive member of the national body. She feels a sense of pride in her ability to contribute, a feeling that her small efforts are part of a grand, historic undertaking. The school day ends late. Keiko walks home as the sun sets, casting long shadows over the city. She is tired, but it is a satisfying, purposeful kind of fatigue. At home, she helps her mother with the evening meal and the household chores. She does her homework, hunched over her small desk, practicing her calligraphy or memorizing historical dates. The family eats dinner together, and her father might share more news from the paper, his voice full of conviction. He speaks of the need for America and Britain to understand Japan's rightful place in the world, of the oil embargoes that are an act of aggression against their nation. Keiko listens, absorbing the worldview of her parents and her teachers. It is the only world she knows. Before bed, she might have a few moments to herself. Perhaps she reads a story or looks at a magazine. But the images and stories are all aligned with the national mood. Tales of heroic soldiers, of self-sacrificing women, of the beauty and strength of Japan. There is no room for doubt, no alternative perspective. Her world is a closed, coherent system of belief and duty. As she prepares for sleep, laying out her futon on the tatami mat floor, she thinks about her day, the assembly, the lessons, the sewing, the drills. She feels a sense of belonging, of being a small but important part of something vast and powerful. She does not feel oppressed, she feels a sense of purpose. She is a daughter of the emperor, a child of the rising sun. She falls asleep with the national anthem still echoing softly in her mind, ready to wake up and serve again tomorrow. The date is December 6th, 1941. In one day, her world and the world of millions of others will change forever.
An Italian baker in Rome under Allied bombing. The day for Gino, a baker in the Trastevere neighborhood of Rome, has always begun in the dark. For 30 years he has woken while the city sleeps, the moon still high over the terracotta roofs. He would walk through the silent, cobbled alleys, the only sounds the echo of his own footsteps and the gentle lapping of the Tiber against its stone embankments. But now, in 1943, the darkness is different. It is deeper, more menacing. It is a blackout darkness, and the silence is often broken by the mournful rising and falling wail of the sirena antiaerea. The war, which for so long felt distant, a thing of newspaper headlines and Mussolini's bombastic speeches from the balcony of Palazzo Venezia, has come home. The Allies are bombing Rome. Gino's bakery is small, a family business, passed down from his father. The air inside is his sanctuary, a familiar and comforting blend of yeast, flour, and the heat from the massive wood-fired brick oven. The oven is the heart of the bakery, a living thing that he tends with a practiced, loving care. But now, everything is a struggle. Flour is scarce, a coarse gray substance adulterated with whatever fillers the authorities can find. Yeast is a treasure. The good olive oil of his youth is a distant memory, replaced by fats of dubious origin. Sugar is almost non-existent. He is no longer an artist of bread, but a magician of scarcity, his daily task to conjure something edible, something that resembles bread, from the meager ingredients he can procure through the ration system and the clandestine connections of the black market. His movements in the pre-dawn hours are a slow, rhythmic ballet. He measures the flour, his hands dusty white in the dim light of a single shielded bulb. He mixes the dough in a huge wooden trough, his arms and shoulders straining with the familiar effort. The dough feels different now. It is heavy, reluctant, lacking the life and elasticity he remembers. He kneads it with a weary patience, his mind drifting. He thinks of his son, a soldier on the Eastern Front, a place he can barely imagine. a frozen hell of snow and steel. He has not had a letter in months. The worry is a constant cold knot in his stomach. He kneads the worry into the dough, along with the flour and the water. He thinks of the Duce, the leader who promised them a new Roman Empire, a place in the sun. Now the sun brings not glory, but the glint of bombers high in the sky. As the first loaves go into the oven, the city outside begins to stir. The first rays of sun touch the ancient stones, but there is a tension in the air. The people of Rome, who have always lived with a certain theatrical flair, a love of noise and gesture, have grown quieter, more watchful. When Gino opens the front of his shop, a queue has already formed. The faces are familiar, the women from his street. Their expressions a mixture of fatigue and stoic resolve. They clutch their ration cards, their string bags. They do not ask for his best pane di Genzano or his crisp rosetta buns anymore. They ask simply, is there bread today? He sells them the dense, dark loaves, weighing each one carefully. He knows it is not his best work. It is a bread of survival, not of pleasure. But it is warm and it is sustenance, and for that they are grateful. The conversations in the queue are hushed, furtive. They trade rumors. The Allies have landed in Sicily. The Germans are sending more troops into the city. The king is silent. No one knows what to believe. After the morning rush, there was a lull. Gino cleans his work surfaces, the flour dust settling like a fine powder over everything. He listens to the radio, the official broadcasts from AEIR, full of patriotic music and reports of heroic Italian resistance. The words sound hollow, disconnected from the reality of the queues, the scarcity, and the fear. He knows the truth is found in the whispers on the street, not in the confident voice on the wireless. He sits for a moment at a small table in the back, drinking a cup of bitter chicory coffee. He looks at a faded photograph on the wall. His family had a picnic years ago in the sun-drenched countryside outside Rome, his son just a small boy, laughing. A wave of profound sadness washes over him. He feels a deep, aching nostalgia for a world of simple certainties that has vanished. And then it comes, the siren. It starts as a low moan and climbs to a high-pitched, soul-shaking shriek that echoes off the ancient buildings. The city, which for so long had been moving in a slow, tired rhythm, is jolted into frantic action. People run for the nearest shelter. Shopkeepers pull down their metal shutters. Gino's heart pounds. He quickly puts away the remaining loaves, covers his dough, and heads for the cellar beneath his shop. It is a small, damp space, smelling of earth and old wine barrels. A few of his neighbors huddle there with him. An old woman clutches her rosary, her lips moving in silent prayer. A young mother tries to soothe her crying child. They sit in the darkness, listening. The sound of the bombers is a low, terrifying drone that seems to come from everywhere at once. It grows louder, a physical vibration that you feel in your teeth, in your bones. Then comes the whistle of the falling bombs, a sound that seems to tear the sky apart, followed by the deep, shuddering crump of the explosions. The ground shakes, dust and debris rain down from the ceiling of the cellar. The single bare bulb flickers and goes out, plunging them into absolute blackness. In that darkness, there was only the sound of breathing, of whimpering, and the roar of the war overhead. Gino closes his eyes and prays. He prays for his son, for his neighbors, for his city, this eternal city that has seen so much and is now being brutalized from the sky. He feels an immense, helpless rage. This is not the glorious war he was promised. This is just noise and death and terror in a dark cellar. The raid seems to last an eternity, but it is probably only a few minutes. The sound of the planes recedes, the explosions become more distant. A blessed silence falls. broken only by the ringing in their ears. They wait, not daring to move, until the long, steady note of the all-clear siren sounds, a message of survival. They emerge slowly, blinking, into a world hazed with smoke and dust. The air smells of cordite and burning. He looks up and down his street. Miraculously, his block is untouched. But in the distance, a column of black smoke rises against the blue sky. The raid was on the railway yards at San Lorenzo, they will learn later. A strategic target, but houses and a church were hit too. There are always mistakes. He goes back into his bakery. The floor is covered in a fresh layer of dust. A few things have fallen from the shelves, but the oven is still warm. The dough is still there. He takes a deep breath, the air thick with the after scent of destruction, and he goes back to work. He uncovers the dough, he shapes the loaves, he puts them in the oven. It is all he knows how to do, to make bread, to feed people. In a world of chaos and death, it is his small, defiant act of life. He will be here tomorrow, in the dark, to light the fire, to mix the dough, to offer a piece of warm bread to a city that is hungry and afraid and enduring.
A French resistance courier on a low-risk delivery day. The morning in Lyon is gray and damp, a typical autumn day where the rivers Saône and Rhône seem to exhale a permanent mist that clings to the stone buildings. For a young woman named Cécile, the day begins with an act of deliberate, practiced normalcy. She is a student at the university, or at least that is her cover story. Her real work is quieter, more dangerous, and happens in the spaces between the lines of her official life. She lives in a small apartment with her aunt, a woman whose eyes hold a deep, unspoken understanding and a constant simmering worry. Cécile dresses not as a clandestine operative, but as a drab, unremarkable student. A simple wool skirt, a plain blouse, thick stockings, and sensible worn shoes. Her hair is tied back without flair. The goal is to be forgettable, to blend into the background, to be one of the thousands of anonymous faces in the occupied city. Her breakfast is weak coffee and a piece of dark, heavy bread. Her aunt moves around the small kitchen with a quiet efficiency, her movements full of a love that cannot be spoken aloud. They do not talk about Cécile's errands. They talk about the price of vegetables, about a neighbor who is ill. This performance of the mundane is their first line of defense. Before she leaves, Cécile checks her appearance in the small, cracked mirror by the door, not to see if she looks pretty, but to see if she looks ordinary. Satisfied, she picks up her worn leather satchel, heavy with university textbooks. Tucked inside a hollowed-out history book is her delivery for the day. A small, tightly folded packet of tissue paper containing information about German troop movements in the region, transcribed in a minuscule code. Today is what her contact calls a journée tranquille, a quiet day, a low-risk delivery. But there is no such thing as a truly low-risk day. Walking through the streets of Lyon is a lesson in dual perception. She sees the city she has always known, the elegant squares, the bustling markets, the famous traboules, the secret passageways that cut through the buildings of the old town. But she also sees the city of the occupation, the swastika flag hanging limp and ominously from the Hôtel de Ville, the German soldiers, their gray uniforms and confident strides, a constant alien presence, the French milice, the collaborationist police, who are often more feared than the Germans, for they know the city and its people. She must keep her eyes down, her expression neutral. To show fear is to attract attention. To show defiance is to invite disaster. She walks with a steady, unhurried pace, her satchel clutched in her hand. Her route is not direct. It is a carefully planned, meandering path designed to detect surveillance. She will walk down a busy street, then suddenly turn into a quiet side alley. She will stop to look in a shop window, using the reflection to scan the street behind her. She will board a tram for a few stops, then get off and double back on foot. These are the drills she has practiced endlessly in her mind. Her heart maintains a steady, slow rhythm, a discipline she has taught herself. Panic is the enemy. She focuses on the details of the city around her, the smell of roasting chestnuts from a street vendor, the sound of children's laughter from a hidden courtyard, the way the light reflects off the wet cobblestones. These details keep her grounded in the present moment, preventing her mind from racing ahead to the what-ifs. Her first stop is a library. It is a safe place, quiet and anonymous. She goes to the history section, finds the book she needs, and pretends to read. This is a dead drop. She is not meeting anyone. She will leave the package for someone else to retrieve later. She sits at a heavy oak table, the book open in front of her. Her hands are steady as she slips the hollowed-out history book back onto the shelf in its precise, prearranged position. Then she takes another book, a volume of poetry, and sits for another 20 minutes. She actually reads a few poems by Verlaine, the words a strange and beautiful contrast to the grim reality of her task. Leaving the library, she feels a small wave of relief, but the day's work is not over. Her next task is to deliver a verbal message. This is more dangerous, as it requires a face-to-face meeting, however brief. The meeting point is a busy outdoor market. The air is thick with the smells of cabbage, cheese, and damp earth. She moves through the crowd, her senses on high alert. Her contact is a man who sells vegetables. She does not know his name. He is only the gardener. She approaches his stall, pretending to inspect the leeks. The exchange must be seamless, invisible to any observer. She asks the price of the potatoes. He replies, and in his reply, he embeds a code word. She responds with the countersign. The test is passed. Then, while he weighs the potatoes and she fumbles in her purse for the payment, she delivers the message in a low, conversational tone, a string of seemingly innocuous sentences about her sick cousin that is in fact a detailed set of instructions. He nods, his face impassive. The transaction is complete. She takes her small bag of potatoes and walks away, melting back into the crowd. No one has noticed a thing. She has just helped to coordinate the sabotage of a railway line. The rest of her day must be spent maintaining her cover. She goes to the university. She attends a lecture on Molière, taking careful notes, her mind only half on the classic play. She looks around at her fellow students. She wonders how many of them are like her, living secret lives. Who can be trusted? The answer is no one, except those in her small, isolated cell. After the lecture, she meets a friend, a real friend who knows nothing of her other life. They have a coffee, a bitter ersatz brew, in a small cafe. They talk about professors, about exams, about the lack of decent films in the cinemas. For Cecile, this conversation is both a relief and a strain. It is a relief to act like a normal young woman, but it is a strain to maintain the facade, to laugh at a joke when her mind is on the man with the potatoes, on the coded message in the library book. The journey home in the late afternoon feels different. The tasks are done. The immediate danger has passed, for now, but the tension does not disappear completely. It is a low hum that lives permanently under her skin. She sees a German patrol stopping a man on the street, checking his papers. Her own papers are in order. Her story is solid, but her heart gives a small involuntary leap of fear. She forces herself to walk on, her pace unchanged. Back in the apartment, her aunt looks at her with a question in her eyes that she will not ask.
Cecile gives a small, almost imperceptible nod. Her aunt's shoulders relax just a little. She helps with the evening meal. They listen to the BBC on the hidden radio, the volume turned down so low it is just a whisper of static and a voice of hope from London. Later, in her room, Cecile sits by the window looking out at the blacked-out city. The day was quiet. No alarms, no close calls, but she knows that her small, forgettable actions are threads in a vast, invisible web, a web of defiance, of hope. She has done her part. Tomorrow, there will be a new set of errands, a new set of risks. She closes the curtains, and in the darkness, she allows herself a moment of quiet satisfaction before the fear and the need for vigilance return with the morning light.
A Canadian forest worker harvesting timber for the war effort. The world is green and smells of pine. The air in the deep forests of British Columbia is cool and clean, a stark contrast to the smoke-filled skies of industrial cities or the cordite-laced air of Europe. Here, the war feels very far away, a distant rumble on the other side of the planet. But the war is here too, in the rhythmic thud of axes, the high-pitched whine of two-man cross-cut saws, and the crash of giant trees falling to the forest floor. A young man, let's call him Alistair, is a logger. He didn't enlist. He was deemed more valuable here, in the woods, part of a vast, silent army of men harvesting the timber that is as crucial to the war effort as steel or oil. The wood he cuts will become mosquito bombers, the wooden wonder of the Royal Air Force. It will become crates for ammunition, decking for ships, and barracks for soldiers. He is fighting the war with an axe and a saw. His day begins in the darkness of a bunkhouse in a remote logging camp. The air is thick with the smell of damp wool, wood smoke, and sleeping men. The sound of a loud clanging bell wakes them. Alistair rolls out of his narrow bunk, his muscles already aching in anticipation of the day's labor. He pulls on his heavy wool trousers, flannel shirt, and caulk boots, their sharp spikes designed to grip the wet, slippery logs. The men move with a wearied economy of motion, dressing and heading to the mess hall. Breakfast is a mountain of food: pancakes, eggs, bacon, potatoes. It is fuel for the immense physical demands of the day. The men eat quickly, their conversation sparse, a low rumble of voices talking about the weather, a piece of equipment, a story from the weekend in the nearest town. They are a mix of seasoned old-timers, young men like Alistair, and conscientious objectors who have chosen to serve their country in this non-combatant role. After breakfast, they ride out to the logging site on a speeder, a small open-sided rail car that rattles along a narrow-gauge track laid deep into the forest. The ride is cold, the wind sharp, but the scenery is breathtaking. They travel through a cathedral of ancient trees: Douglas fir, Sitka spruce, western red cedar, giants that have stood for centuries. Alistair feels a mix of awe and a strange kind of sorrow for these magnificent trees he is about to bring down. But this feeling is quickly suppressed by the practical demands of the job. There is a war on. The trees must fall. At the work site, the air fills with the sounds of labor. Alistair is part of a felling crew. His partner is an older, sinewy man named Jacques, a French-Canadian with hands like leather and a quiet, watchful demeanor. Their dance is one of practiced coordination. First, they chop the undercut with their razor-sharp axes, a deep wedge on the side of the tree that will guide its fall. The rhythmic thwack, thwack, thwack of their axes echoes through the forest. Then comes the saw. The two-man cross-cut saw, the misery whip, is over 6 feet long. They take up their positions on opposite sides of the massive trunk. The work is a partnership of push and pull, a steady hypnotic rhythm. Pull, release. Pull, release. Sawdust smelling sweet and resinous sprays with each stroke. The saw sings a high whining song as it bites deeper and deeper into the wood.
It is grueling work. Alistair's back and shoulders burn. Sweat pours down his face, even in the cool air. He must stay focused, not just on the rhythm, but on the tree itself, listening for the first signs that it is ready to give way. The foreman, the bull of the woods, moves between the crews, his voice a gravelly bark of instructions and encouragement. Safety is a constant concern. A falling branch, a widowmaker, can kill a man instantly. A tree that falls the wrong way can crush a crew. When their tree begins to groan, to lean, Jock gives the signal, a loud, clear shout. Timber! The call echoes through the forest, a warning to everyone in the area. They pull the saw free and scramble away to a safe distance. They watch as the giant tree hangs for a moment, as if making a final decision, and then begins its majestic, terrifying fall. It gathers speed, tearing through the branches of smaller trees, and hits the ground with a deafening crash that shakes the earth. A moment of silence follows, a brief, respectful pause, and then it is back to work. At midday, a whistle blows for lunch. The men find a spot on a fallen log, opening their lunch pails. The food is simple and hearty: thick sandwiches, a piece of fruit, a thermos of hot, sweet tea. They eat, looking out at the landscape they are transforming, a patchwork of standing forest and cleared ground. They might talk about news from the radio, of battles in Italy or the Pacific. The war feels abstract, a story from another world. But then someone might mention that the spruce they are cutting is perfect for aircraft frames, and the connection becomes real again. Alistair looks at his hands, calloused and stained with pitch. He is tired, but he feels a deep sense of satisfaction. His work is tangible. He can see the results of his labor lying on the forest floor, ready to be transported, ready to become part of the war effort. The afternoon is a repetition of the morning. They move to the next tree, and the next. The work of the buckers follow them, cutting the fallen giants into manageable lengths. Then the high riggers and the yarders move in, using a complex system of cables and steam-powered donkey engines to drag the massive logs to the railway line. The forest, once so quiet, is now an industrial site, a noisy, dangerous, and incredibly efficient machine for harvesting wood. Alistair focuses on the rhythm of the saw, the bite of the axe. It is a way to keep his mind from wandering to his brother, who is in the Navy, somewhere on the treacherous waters of the North Atlantic. He prefers the solid, predictable danger of the forest to the unseen, unknown threat of a U-boat torpedo. As the light begins to fade, the final whistle blows. The men gather their tools, their movements slower now, their bodies heavy with fatigue. The ride back to camp on the speeder is quieter. Some men doze, their heads lolling with the motion of the car. Alistair looks out at the darkening forest, the stumps of the trees they have cut like dark monuments in the twilight. The camp is a welcome sight, a small island of light and warmth in the vast wilderness. The evening is a time of simple routines: a wash in the wash house, the hot water soothing his aching muscles; a huge dinner in the mess hall, the men eating with a hunger born of hard labor. After dinner, the bunkhouse becomes a place of quiet activity. Some men play cards, a low-stakes game of poker or cribbage. Others lie on their bunks, reading well-worn paperback novels or writing letters home. Alistair writes to his family, his large, clumsy handwriting filling the page. He tells them about the work, about the big trees, about the good food. He doesn't write about the danger or the bone-deep weariness he feels at the end of each day. He wants them to know he is doing his part. He is strong, he is useful. He is a soldier in a different kind of army. Later, lying in his bunk, he can hear the wind in the trees outside, a sound like the sea. He thinks of the mosquito bombers made from the spruce he helped to cut, flying silent and fast through the night skies over Germany. He closes his eyes and falls into a deep, dreamless sleep, the sleep of the utterly exhausted.
The sun rises over the terraced hills of Mural China, casting a soft golden light on the rice paddies that cling to the slopes like steps for a giant. In a small village of mud brick houses and tiled roofs, the day for a woman named May begins not with the crow of a rooster, but with a feeling of quiet dread. The village has been under Japanese occupation for several years now, and life has been stripped down to its barest essentials: survival and the avoidance of notice. May is a widow. Her husband was killed in the early days of the invasion. She lives with her elderly mother and her young son, a small family unit clinging to existence in a world of violence and uncertainty. Her first task is to fetch water from the village well. She carries 2 wooden buckets on a yoke across her shoulders, her movements slow and careful. The path is well worn, but her eyes are constantly scanning the surroundings. The presence of the Japanese garrison at the edge of the village has changed everything. A simple trip to the well is fraught with potential danger. She might encounter a patrol. A wrong look, a failure to bow deeply enough could result in a beating or worse. She keeps her eyes to the ground, her face a mask of humble deference. The other women at the well are the same. They exchange no greetings, only brief, knowing glances. The shared language of fear has replaced the easy chatter of the past. Back in her small, dark home, she prepares the morning meal. It is a thin gruel of millet, what little they have managed to hide from the soldiers. The Japanese army lives off the land, which means they live off the labor of the villagers. Requisitioning is constant and brutal. They take the best rice, the chickens, the pigs, the vegetables. The villagers are left with the scraps. May's small, hidden cache of grain, buried under the earthen floor, is their most precious secret. She cooks over a small, smoky fire, the smell of the burning straw filling the single room. Her son, small and thin for his age, eats his portion in silence, his eyes large and watchful. He has never known a world without soldiers, without fear. After the meal, the work begins. May and her mother are assigned to work in the fields, the very fields that once belonged to their family and their neighbors. Now the land is effectively the property of the Imperial Japanese Army. A Japanese administrator, along with a few local collaborators, oversees the work. They are cultivating rice, not for themselves, but for the occupiers. The work is backbreaking. May spends her day bent over in the flooded paddy, transplanting the young rice seedlings. The water is cold, the mud thick and clinging. Her back aches. Her hands are raw. The sun beats down on her straw hat. The only sounds are the squelch of mud, the drone of insects, and the occasional shouted order from a guard. She works with a quiet, inward-focused intensity. To slow down is to invite punishment. To complain is unthinkable. Her mind retreats to a place of memories. She remembers the village before the war. She remembers the festivals, the weddings, the sound of laughter echoing through the alleys. She remembers her husband, his strong hands, his easy smile. These memories are a source of both pain and strength. They remind her of what has been lost, but also of who she is beyond this current state of servitude. She is not just a laborer for a foreign army. She is May, a wife, a mother of this village. She looks at the other villagers in the field, their faces etched with the same stoic endurance. They are a forest of bent backs, a community of shared suffering. There is no open defiance, but there is a powerful, silent resistance in their survival, in their refusal to be completely broken. At midday, they are allowed a short break. They sit on the earthen banks that separate the paddies, eating the cold rice balls they brought with them. The food is meager, but it is a moment of rest. May shares her portion with her son, who has been assigned the lighter work of chasing birds away from the crops. She watches him, her heart a tight knot of love and fear. She wants him to have a future, a life of peace and dignity, a life she can barely imagine anymore. She sees a patrol of Japanese soldiers walking along the path at the edge of the field. Their bayonets glint in the sun. She tells her son in a low, urgent whisper to keep his head down, not to look at them. He nods, his small face serious. he has learned the lessons of survival well. The afternoon is a long, slow continuation of the morning's labor. The sun is relentless. A woman nearby faints from the heat and exhaustion. She is carried to the shade, and after a few minutes she is forced back to work. There is no compassion, only the demand for productivity. May focuses on the rhythm of her work, one seedling at a time. Plant, step, bend. Plant, step, bend. It is a way to make the time pass, to endure the unendurable. She thinks of the whispers she has heard, rumors of guerrilla fighters in the mountains, of a Chinese army far away that is still fighting. These rumors are like a distant, almost unbelievable source of light. She does not know if they are true, but she holds on to them. The idea that someone, somewhere, is fighting back for them is a kind of spiritual sustenance. As the sun begins to set, the administrator signals the end of the workday. The villagers gather their simple tools and begin the slow walk back to the village. Their bodies are heavy with fatigue, their clothes caked in mud. They walk in silence, a procession of shadows in the fading light. Back in her home, May's work is not done. She must prepare the evening meal, another portion of thin millet gruel. She must tend to her mother, whose cough has been getting worse. She must wash their clothes in a bucket of precious water. The small acts of domesticity, of caring for her family, are what keep her sane. They are her purpose. In the evening, the village is under a strict curfew. The doors are barred. No lights are allowed to show. The Japanese soldiers patrol the dark streets, and the sound of their heavy boots on the dirt paths is a terrifying reminder of their power. May and her family sit in the near darkness of their home. Her mother might tell a traditional story, her voice a soft, reedy whisper, a tale from a time of heroes and dragons, a world away from their current reality. May mends her son's thin shirt by the faint light of a tiny oil lamp, the flame carefully shielded. The needle moves in and out of the worn fabric, a small, hopeful act of making something whole again. Later, lying on her sleeping mat on the floor, she listens to the sounds of the night. The chirping of crickets, the wind in the eaves, the distant bark of a dog, and sometimes the other sounds. A sudden shout, a door being kicked in, a scream quickly stifled. These are the sounds of the occupation, the random, brutal intrusions of violence into the fragile peace of the night. She pulls her son closer, holding him tight, as if her own body could shield him from all the evil in the world. She closes her eyes and prays to her ancestors, not for victory, not for glory, but for something much simpler, for the sun to rise tomorrow and for her family to still be alive to see it. It is the only prayer she has left.
An Australian housewife in Darwin during air raids. The air in Darwin, at the very top of Australia, is thick, wet, and heavy. It's the build-up to the wet season in late 1942, and the humidity clings to your skin like a second layer of clothing. For a housewife named Jean, life has become a strange mix of tropical languor and high-alert tension. Darwin is no longer a sleepy, remote outpost of the empire. It is a frontline town. The war, which had seemed a distant affair of newsreels and newspaper maps, had arrived with shocking violence in February when the Japanese bombed the harbor and the town. Now, the threat of air raids is a constant, simmering presence, as real as the heat and the mosquitoes. Jean's day starts early, with the first light of the tropical dawn. The birds in the mango tree outside her elevated wooden house begin their raucous chorus. Her husband, Tom, is an administrator at the docks, a key part of the war effort. He is already up and gone. Her job is to maintain the home, to create a pocket of normalcy and order in a world that feels increasingly chaotic. She makes breakfast for her 2 young children, a boy of 10 and a girl of 7.
The food is simpler now. Rationing has reached even this far-flung corner of the country. Powdered milk, tinned bully beef, and endless potatoes are the staples. Fresh fruit and vegetables are whatever she can grow in their garden, a constant battle against the voracious insects and the oppressive heat. After the simple breakfast, the first task is the air raid drill. It has become a ritual, as routine as brushing their teeth. She calmly instructs the children. "All right, you two, you hear the siren. Where do you go?" "To the slit trench, Mum," they shout in unison. "And what do you take?" "The water bottle and the first aid kit." They practice it. They grab the designated items and run out to the backyard, scrambling into the narrow, deep trench that Tom and their neighbor dug with shovels and sheer determination. It's a raw gash of red earth in the yard, covered with a few sheets of corrugated iron. Jean tries to make a game of it, to keep the fear from their eyes, but she can see the anxiety in the way her son clutches the water bottle, his knuckles white. With the drill over, the ordinary tasks of the day begin, but each one is tinged by the war. She does the washing, scrubbing the clothes by hand in a copper tub, the water precious. As she hangs the wet sheets on the line, she scans the sky. The sky is no longer just a canvas for beautiful sunrises and dramatic tropical storm clouds. It is a source of potential danger. Every distant drone of an engine makes her pause, her head cocked, listening. Is it one of ours or one of theirs? The sound of the RAAF Wirraways and Spitfires based at the nearby airfield is a comfort, a reassurance. The sound of an unidentified plane is a jolt of pure adrenaline. She heads to the shops, a small collection of buildings in the center of town. Many of the storefronts are boarded up, the civilian population having been largely evacuated south after the first big raids. But some have remained, the stubborn, the essential, the ones with nowhere else to go. The women she meets in the queue for the butcher are a hardy, resilient bunch. Their conversation is a mix of domestic concerns and military intelligence. They trade rumors about Japanese fleet movements and tips on how to make a decent stew out of bully beef. They talk about the all-clear signal, the all-raid warning, the different sounds of the sirens. They have become reluctant experts in the nomenclature of aerial bombardment. Back at home, she prepares the midday meal. The house is designed for the tropics, built on stilts to catch the breeze, with wide verandas and louvered windows. But now it feels terribly exposed, fragile. She looks at her family photographs on the sideboard, her wedding portrait, the children's baby pictures. She has a small suitcase packed with these sentimental treasures, ready to be grabbed in an instant. It sits by the back door, a constant, silent reminder of the precariousness of their lives. While she cooks, she listens to the wireless. The news from the Kokoda track in New Guinea is grim. The fighting is close, desperate. The war is not on their doorstep, it is in their front yard. The children play in the shade under the house, their games a strange reflection of their reality. They play soldiers and air raids. Their imaginary bombs make whistling sounds. She calls the men for lunch. As they eat, the heat of the day builds. The air becomes still and oppressive. The world seems to be holding its breath. And then it comes. A distant, rising and falling wail. The air raid siren. There is no game this time. Jean's voice is calm but firm. Trench, now. She grabs the emergency suitcase, the children grab their designated items, and they run. They scramble down into the dark, narrow space. The air in the trench is cool and smells of damp earth. It is claustrophobic, but it is safe. Or safer, at least. They huddle together in the darkness. Jean holds her children close, one under each arm. She can feel their small bodies trembling. She tries to hum a tune, a nursery rhyme, anything to distract them from the sounds outside. The drone of the Japanese bombers grows louder, a heavy, menacing sound. Then the thud of the anti-aircraft guns from the batteries around the town begin, a reassuring, defiant bark. They hear the whistle of the bombs. Jean flinches with each one, pressing her children's faces into her shoulders, trying to shield them with her own body. The ground shakes. A blast, closer this time, rains dirt down on their corrugated iron roof. Her daughter starts to cry, a high, thin sound of terror. She just holds them tighter, whispering reassurances she doesn't feel herself. She's terrified, but her fear is a luxury she cannot afford to show. She must be their rock, their shield, their calm in the storm. The raid passes. The sound of the planes fades. The guns fall silent. A different kind of silence descends, heavy and anxious. They wait for the long, steady note of the all clear. It feels like an eternity. When it finally comes, they emerge, blinking into the bright, hazy sunlight. The air is thick with smoke and the smell of explosives. Jean scans the neighborhood. A plume of black smoke is rising from the direction of the docks where Tom is. Her heart seizes with fear, but her own house is standing. The mango tree is still there, some of its leaves shredded. She must focus on the children, on the immediate tasks. She checks them for injuries, her hands shaking slightly. They are dusty and scared, but they are safe. She takes them inside, gives them a drink of water. She forces herself to move, to act normally. She starts to clean up the dust and debris that has been blasted into the house. Her movements are automatic, but her mind is at the docks. She turns on the wireless, waiting for news. The announcer's voice is calm, reporting that a raid has occurred, that damage has been sustained at the port facilities. There is no mention of casualties. The waiting is a special kind of torture. Hours pass. The afternoon light begins to soften, and then she hears his footsteps on the path. Tom. He walks in, his face black with soot, his clothes torn, but he is whole. He is alive. She runs to him, and for a moment they just hold each other, the relief so profound it is physically painful. He tells her it was close. A bomb hit the wharf next to his. He saw terrible things. They don't speak of it in front of the children. Later, after the children are asleep, they will sit on the veranda in the dark, and he will talk, and she will listen. That night, as she lies in bed, the humid air is filled with the sound of the crickets and the frogs, but she is listening for another sound, the drone of a plane. Sleep is shallow, restless. She is a sentry, even in her dreams. She is a wife, a mother, a survivor on the front line of a war that has turned her tropical home into a battlefield. And she will get up tomorrow and do it all again.
A Polish nurse in a secret Warsaw hospital, 1944. The city of Warsaw is a ghost of its former self, a landscape of ruins held together by courage and sheer will. It is August 1944, and the uprising is raging. The Polish Home Army has risen against the German occupiers, and the city has become a brutal, street-by-street battlefield. In a cellar beneath a bombed-out apartment building, a place that was once a wine storage, a secret hospital is operating. The air is thick and heavy, a dense mixture of antiseptic, blood, dust, and the cloying sweetness of decay. A young nurse named Zofia moves through this subterranean world of pain with a quiet, focused intensity. Her white apron is stained. Her face is pale with fatigue, but her hands are steady. Her day does not have a beginning or an end. It is a continuous cycle of work, punctuated by brief moments of restless, haunted sleep on a cot in a corner. She is woken not by an alarm clock,
but by the cry of a wounded soldier, or by the surgeon, his voice a low, urgent rasp, calling for more bandages. She rises immediately, her body aching, and gets to work. There is no breakfast, only a cup of ersatz coffee, bitter and black, and perhaps a piece of hard, stale bread if they are lucky. The supply lines into their section of the city are cut. They are running out of everything: food, water, medicine, hope. Her first task of the day is to do her rounds. The hospital is a maze of makeshift beds, mattresses on the floor, doors laid across piles of bricks. The patients are a mix of Home Army fighters, many of them shockingly young, and civilians caught in the crossfire. She moves from one to the next, her footsteps silent on the earthen floor. She checks their wounds, changes their dressings, and administers what little pain relief they have left. The dressings are not clean white gauze. They are strips of torn-up bed sheets washed in precious murky water and boiled for sterilization over a small smoky fire. She works with a gentle efficiency, her touch as soft as she can make it. She offers a sip of water, a word of encouragement, a small, fleeting smile. For many of these men, her face is the last kind face they will ever see. The sounds of the battle are a constant, terrifying symphony. The chatter of machine guns, the sharp crack of sniper fire, the dull, earth-shaking crump of mortar shells. Sometimes a blast is so close that the cellar shakes, and a shower of dust and debris rains down from the ceiling. The patients flinch, but Zofia has trained herself not to. She must be the calm center in this storm of chaos. Her fear is a private thing, a cold knot she keeps locked deep inside. To show it would be to betray the trust these wounded men have placed in her. They look to her not just for medical care, but for a sign that there is still order, still compassion, in a world that has descended into madness. A new casualty is brought in, carried on a makeshift stretcher by two teenage boys, their faces smudged with dirt and gunpowder. The boy on the stretcher is no older than them, his leg a mangled ruin of blood and bone. The surgeon, an older man who was once a renowned professor at the university, examines the wound with a weary, practiced eye. His verdict is swift and brutal: amputation. There is no time for sentiment, no resources for complex surgery. The goal is to save the life, even if it means sacrificing the limb. Zofia prepares for the operation. There is no proper operating theater, only a corner of the cellar lit by a few flickering carbide lamps. There is no anesthetic, only a bottle of crude home-brewed vodka to dull the pain, and a leather strap for the boy to bite down on. The operation is a grim medieval scene. Zofia's job is to assist, to hand the surgeon his instruments, which have been sterilized in the same boiling pot as the bandages, to hold the patient down, to wipe the sweat from the surgeon's brow. She must not look away. She must be strong. She focuses on the technical aspects of the task, on the instruments, the swabs, the flow of blood. It is the only way to endure the boy's muffled screams, the horrific sound of the saw on bone. When it is over, she cleans up, her movements mechanical. She helps to carry the boy, now mercifully unconscious, to a cot. She has done this a dozen times in the past week. Each time, a small piece of her soul chips away. In a rare moment of quiet, she might go to the small opening that serves as the cellar's entrance, carefully shielded from sniper fire. She looks out at the sliver of sky visible between the ruined buildings. It is often gray with smoke. She sees the runners, mostly young boys and girls, darting through the rubble-strewn streets, carrying messages, ammunition, and what little food they can find. They are the lifeblood of the uprising, and their bravery is a source of constant amazement to her. She sees the red and white Polish flags defiantly hung from broken buildings, a symbol of their unbreakable spirit. In these moments, she feels a surge of fierce, desperate pride. They are fighting for their city, for their freedom. They are losing, she knows. The Red Army is waiting on the other side of the Vistula River, watching, doing nothing. They have been abandoned. But still they fight. Food is a constant gnawing concern. A scout might return with a sack of barley or a few potatoes scavenged from a bombed-out shop. It is a treasure. A soup is made, a thin, watery broth that is shared among the patients and the staff. It is barely enough to keep them going. Zofia often gives her portion to one of the weaker patients, claiming she is not hungry. The hunger is a physical pain, but the suffering of others is a greater one. Her work is not only physical, but emotional. She writes letters for men who have lost their hands or who are too weak to hold a pen. She listens to their last words, their messages for loved ones they will never see again. She becomes the keeper of their stories, the witness to their sacrifice. She holds the hands of the dying, offering a human connection in their final moments, a presence to ward off the terror of dying alone in a dark cellar. She tells them they are heroes, and she believes it with every fiber of her being. As another night falls, the fighting often intensifies under the cover of darkness. The cellar is lit by a few candles, casting long, flickering shadows on the walls, turning the scene into something from a Goya painting. The air grows colder. Zofia pulls a thin, rough blanket over a sleeping soldier. She sits for a moment on a wooden crate, her body screaming with exhaustion. She closes her eyes, and the faces of the wounded, the dead, and the dying flash behind her eyelids. She thinks of her own family, somewhere in another part of the city. Are they alive? Are they safe? She does not know. She can only pray. She is not just a nurse. She is a soldier in a different uniform. Her weapons are bandages, antiseptic, and compassion. Her battlefield is this cellar of suffering.
The sky over Paris is a soft, pearlescent gray, the kind that has inspired painters for centuries. But for a teenage boy named Luc, the beauty of his city is now a backdrop for a tense, clandestine existence. It is 1943, and the German occupation has settled over Paris like a suffocating blanket. Luc should be in school, worrying about geometry and Latin verbs. Instead, he is a member of the resistance, a small, unassuming cog in a very large and dangerous machine. His job is to be an agent de liaison, a messenger. He is young, he is quick, and he has a face that is easily forgotten, all of which are valuable assets. His day begins in a cramped, fifth-floor apartment that smells of chicory coffee and Gualo's cigarettes. He lives with his mother, a seamstress who works from home, her face a permanent mask of anxiety. She knows what he does, though they never speak of it directly. Her fear for him is a silent, palpable thing in the small room. She hands him his breakfast, a piece of dark bread and a small apple, with a hand that trembles slightly. "Be careful," she whispers. The same two words she says every single morning. It is a prayer. He nods, puts on his worn jacket and a beret, and slings a satchel of school books over his shoulder. The books are his cover. He is just a student on his way to the lycée. But he is not going to the lycée. His first stop is a specific bench in the Luxembourg Gardens. His route is never direct. He has been taught to use the city like a chessboard. He walks, he takes the metro, he doubles back. He is always watching, always aware. He notes the German patrols, the black Citroën cars of the Gestapo, the French milician who are always looking for trouble. He has learned to read the subtle language of the street, the sudden quiet that means a patrol is near, the way people avert their eyes from a collaborator. He sits on the bench, opens a book, and pretends to read. He does not look around. After a few minutes, an old man with a cane sits down at the other end of the bench. They do not speak. They do not acknowledge each other. The old man opens a newspaper, reads for a while, then folds it and leaves it on the bench as he walks away. This is the first pickup. Luc waits a full 5 minutes, then casually picks up the newspaper, folds it under his arm, and leaves the park. Inside the newspaper are ration coupons, forged identity papers, and a list of instructions for his day. His delivery route takes him all over the city. He moves mostly on his bicycle, a rickety, precious machine that gives him speed and mobility. The bicycle allows him to navigate the narrow streets and to disappear quickly if needed. He rides with a deceptive nonchalance, whistling a tune, a picture of carefree youth. But his senses are on high alert. His heart pounds a steady, controlled rhythm. He is carrying sedition in his satchel, and he knows to be caught would mean interrogation at the hands of the Gestapo, imprisonment, or death. His first drop-off is a small package, wrapped in brown paper, to a concierge of an apartment building in the Marais district. The package contains parts for a clandestine radio transmitter. He hands it over with a casual, "For Madame Dubois," from her nephew. The concierge, a grim-faced woman, nods and takes the package without a word. They are strangers, but they are bound by a shared, unspoken purpose. His next stop is a message to be delivered verbally to a bookseller near the Sorbonne. He enters the dusty, cluttered shop and asks for a book of poetry by Aragon. The bookseller, a man with ink-stained fingers and intelligent eyes, understands the code. Luke browses for a few minutes, and when they are alone, he recites the message he has memorized, a seemingly innocent sentence about a meeting time and place. The cat will drink its milk at 9 o'clock by the fountain of Saint-Sulpice. The bookseller nods, and Luke buys the book of poetry and leaves. The work is a strange mixture of the mundane and the terrifying. He rides past the iconic sights of his city, the Louvre, Notre Dame, the Eiffel Tower, all now draped with swastika banners, a constant, ugly reminder of their humiliation. He sees the queues outside the food shops, the grim faces of his fellow Parisians. He feels a surge of cold anger, a feeling that fuels his determination. He is not just delivering messages, he is fighting back. He is helping to keep the spirit of a free France alive in the shadows. At midday, he stops to eat his lunch, the piece of bread and the apple his mother gave him. He sits on a quay by the Seine, watching the water flow past. He sees a German officer walking with a well-dressed French woman, laughing together. He feels a pang of disgust. He looks at the other faces around him, trying to guess their stories. Who is a patriot? Who is a collaborator? Who is just trying to survive? The occupation has turned every interaction, every glance, into a question of loyalty. The most dangerous part of his day is the last delivery. He has to transport a set of microfilm containing intelligence about German coastal defenses to a contact point in a metro station. The metro is crowded, anonymous, but it is also a favorite hunting ground for the Gestapo, who conduct random identity checks. He enters the Châtelet station, a vast, confusing labyrinth of tunnels. He feels a knot of fear tighten in his stomach. He holds the tiny roll of microfilm in his clenched fist. He stands on the crowded platform, trying to look bored, impatient like any other teenager. He sees the German patrol at the far end of the platform, working their way towards him, checking papers. His heart begins to race. The train cannot come fast enough. He forces himself to breathe slowly, to unclench his fist. The patrol is getting closer. Just as they reach the man standing next to him, the train screeches into the station, the doors slide open, and he is swept inside by the surge of the crowd. He has escaped. He gets off at the designated station and makes the drop. He passes the microfilm to a woman in a red scarf in a quick, seamless handshake as they pass on the stairs. The exchange takes less than a second. The relief is immense, a physical wave that leaves him feeling weak in the knees. His work for the day is done. He rides his bicycle home through the dusky, gray streets of Paris. He is no longer a messenger of the resistance. He is just Luke, a boy going home. He can feel the fatigue in his bones, not just from the cycling,
but from the constant, draining tension of the day. When he walks into the apartment, his mother looks up from her sewing machine, her eyes asking the question she never speaks. He gives her a small, tired smile. "I'm home," he says. She nods, and a fraction of the worry leaves her face. He sits down at the small kitchen table, and she places a bowl of thin vegetable soup in front of him. It is the best meal he has ever tasted. Later in his small room, he will actually read the book of poetry he bought. The words of defiance and hope written by a poet of the resistance feel like a personal message to him. He is not alone. He is part of something important, something noble. He falls asleep, his mind already rehearsing the routes and the codes for tomorrow. He is a child, forced to be a man, fighting for the soul of his city, one bicycle ride at a time.
A British girl in the Women's Land Army. The day begins with the insistent crowing of a rooster, a sound that cuts through the thick, damp air of the English countryside. For a young woman named Peggy, a former shop assistant from Manchester, this is still a foreign sound. She is a land girl, a member of the Women's Land Army, and her world has been transformed from city streets and shop counters to muddy fields and milking sheds. She rolls out of a narrow bed in the chilly dormitory of the farmhouse where she is billeted. The room, which she shares with 3 other girls, smells of hay, damped wool and carbolic soap. There is no central heating and the air is cold enough to see her breath. She pulls on her uniform, the green jersey, the brown breeches and the heavy mud-caked boots. It is practical, not glamorous, and it is almost permanently damp. Breakfast in the farmhouse kitchen is a quick, hearty affair. Porridge, thick slices of bread with a scraping of margarine and a mug of strong hot tea. The farmer's wife, a stern but not unkind woman named Mrs. Gable, presides over the meal. She sees the land girls as a necessary nuisance, a strange invasion of city folk who don't know one end of a cow from the other. But she also knows that without them, the farm would fail and the country would go hungry. The men are away fighting, and it is up to the women to bring in the harvest. The fields won't wait, Mrs. Gable is fond of saying, and it is the unofficial motto of their lives. Peggy's first job of the day is in the milking shed. The air inside is warm and thick with the sweet grassy smell of cows and hay. The cows, patient and immense, wait in their stalls. In her first weeks on the farm, Peggy was terrified of them. Now she knows each one by name. She talks to them in a low, soothing voice as she washes their udders and settles onto the 3-legged stool. The work of milking by hand is a rhythmic, demanding task. Squeeze, pull, release. Squeeze, pull, release. The warm milk streams into the metal pail, frothing and white. Her hands and wrists, once soft from handling fabrics, are now strong and calloused. The work is hard, but there is a deep satisfaction in it, a connection to the fundamental processes of life. After milking, the real work of the day begins. Today they are harvesting potatoes. Peggy rides out to the fields on the back of a rattling tractor, driven by one of the few men left on the farm, an old hand named Arthur, whose joints are too stiff for the army. The field stretches out before them, a vast expanse of dark, damp earth. The work is back-breaking. They follow the plow as it turns over the soil, revealing the potatoes. The girls then move down the rows on their hands and knees, gathering the potatoes into baskets. The earth is cold and wet, and the mud seeps into everything. Her back aches, her knees are sore, and her fingernails are permanently rimmed with dirt. The girls work together, their chatter and laughter echoing across the field. They are a mixed bunch, from all over the country and all walks of life. There are factory workers, hairdressers, typists, and even a debutante. The war has thrown them together, erasing old social distinctions. They are united by their shared work, their shared discomforts, and their shared sense of purpose. They sing songs to make the time pass, popular tunes from the radio and bawdy rhymes they've made up themselves. Their camaraderie is a vital source of strength,
a shield against the loneliness and the sheer physical exhaustion of the work. At midday, they stop for lunch. They sit on their potato baskets, unwrapping their packed lunches. A thick sandwich of national loaf with a slice of cheese, an apple, and a flask of cold tea. The food tastes wonderful after a morning of hard labor. Peggy looks out over the rolling green hills of the English countryside. It is a landscape of profound peace and beauty, a stark contrast to the news they hear on the wireless about the bombing of cities and the fighting overseas. She feels a fierce, protective love for this land. She is not just digging up potatoes, she is defending this beauty, this peace. The government posters told them they were fighting in the fields, and for the first time, she truly understands what that means. The afternoon is more of the same. The sun might break through the clouds, warming their backs, or a sudden downpour might soak them to the skin. The weather is just another challenge to be endured. They work until their baskets are full, then haul them to the edge of the field to be loaded onto the tractor. The weight of the basket seems to increase with each load, her muscles screaming in protest. But she keeps going, driven by a sense of duty and the encouragement of the other girls. As the light begins to fade, they head back to the farmhouse. Peggy is tired in a way she has never known before, a bone-deep weariness that goes beyond simple fatigue. The first thing she does is wash. She pumps cold water into a basin and scrubs the dirt from her hands and face. The feeling of being clean, even for a few hours, is a small, precious luxury. Dinner is the main meal of the day, eaten together around the large kitchen table. The food is simple but plentiful. A stew made with vegetables from the garden, more potatoes, and a thick slice of homemade bread. The conversation is lively, a recounting of the day's small triumphs and frustrations. After dinner, there is a precious hour or two of free time. Peggy might sit by the fire, darning her thick wool socks or writing a letter home to her family in Manchester. She tells them about the farm, the animals, the hard work. She tries to make it sound like an adventure, glossing over the aching back, the chilblains on her fingers, and the profound homesickness she sometimes feels, especially at night. Sometimes in the evening they will listen to the radio. The news from the front, the calm, steady voice of the BBC announcer connects their small, isolated world to the larger global conflict. And sometimes, on a clear night, they can hear it, a low, distant drone, the sound of the RAF bombers heading out over the channel towards Germany. They all fall silent listening, thinking of the young men in those planes. They are all part of the same fight, they on the land and those in the air. As she climbs into her cold bed, her body aches but her mind is clear. She is no longer just Peggy, the shop girl. She is a soldier of the soil. She is strong, she is capable, and she is doing work that matters. She falls asleep almost instantly to the sounds of the countryside, the distant hoot of an owl, the rustle of the wind in the trees. She is tired, but she is content. She is part of the land, and she is part of the victory that they are all, in their own ways, working to achieve.
A schoolboy evacuee in the English countryside. The world for a 10-year-old boy named Arthur used to be the smell of coal smoke, the rumble of the London Underground, and the familiar, comforting confines of his family's small terraced house in Bethnal Green. Now, his world is the bewildering scent of damp earth and farm animals, the unnerving silence of the countryside, and the strange, unfamiliar rooms of a stranger's house. Arthur is an evacuee. He arrived here in a small village in Devon a few months ago on a train packed with other children, a gas mask in a cardboard box bouncing against his side, and a label with his name and destination pinned to his coat. He was one of the lucky ones. He and his younger sister Molly were taken in together by a kind elderly couple, the Pearsons. But he is still adrift in a sea of strangeness. His day begins with a sound he is still not used to, the complete and total silence of a country morning, broken only by the chirping of birds outside his window. In London, the day started with the rumble of traffic and the shouts of the milkman. He gets dressed quietly, putting on the rough country clothes the Pearsons bought for him, which feels stiff and strange compared to his old city clothes. He helps his sister Molly, who is only 7, with the buttons on her dress. He feels a great sense of responsibility for her. He is her big brother, her only link to the familiar world they have lost. Breakfast is in a large, warm kitchen that smells of baking bread and wood smoke. Mrs. Pearson, a woman with a kind, crinkled smile and hands that are always busy, gives them porridge with a dollop of jam and a glass of fresh, creamy milk. The milk is a revelation to Arthur. It tastes nothing like the thin, bluish milk that used to come in bottles in London. Mr. Pearson, a quiet man who smells of pipe tobacco and earth, sits at the table reading the paper, his brow furrowed as he follows the news of the war. They talk to Arthur and Molly in their slow, soft Devon accents, a dialect that Arthur still struggles to understand sometimes. They are kind, but he feels a constant, aching pang of homesickness for his real mom and dad. After breakfast, it's time for school. Arthur and Molly walk a mile along a muddy lane to the village school. The school is a small stone building, and the classes are a jumble of local children and evacuees from all over London. The London children stick together, a tribe of displaced city dwellers, their sharp Cockney accents standing out against the local burr. The lessons are different, too. There is less emphasis on arithmetic and more on nature study. The teacher takes them on walks to identify trees and birds. For Arthur, who could navigate the London tube map by heart, the names of wildflowers and the calls of different birds are a baffling new language. He feels clumsy and ignorant. He misses the grimy, exciting certainty of the city. The local children are not always friendly. They sometimes call the evacuees townies and make fun of their accents. There are occasional scuffles in the schoolyard. Arthur, though not a fighter by nature, has learned to stand up for himself and for Molly. He has discovered a toughness in himself that he didn't know he had. He is a guardian, a protector in this strange new land. Lunch is a packed meal eaten in the school hall. Mrs. Pearson always gives them a thick sandwich and a piece of fruit. He trades part of his sandwich with another London boy for a comic book. These comics, full of stories of heroic Spitfire pilots and daring commandos, are a precious escape, a connection to a world of adventure that makes more sense to him than the quiet rhythms of the countryside. After school, there are chores to be done at the Pearsons' house. This is another new experience for Arthur. He learns to collect eggs from the chicken coop, a task that initially terrified him. He helps Mr. Pearson in the vegetable garden, digging and weeding. The work is hard, but he finds a quiet satisfaction in it. He likes the smell of the soil and the feeling of growing something with his own hands. He is learning the names of the vegetables, the tools, the seasons. He is slowly, reluctantly, putting down roots in this new soil. His favorite part of the day is when he has free time. He and Molly might go down to the small stream at the bottom of the Pearsons' Arden. They build dams with stones and sail leaf boats on the water. In these moments, they can forget they are evacuees. They are just children playing. Sometimes Arthur will explore the woods by himself. The woods are a place of both fear and fascination. They are dark and mysterious, full of strange sounds and shadows. He pretends he is a scout, a spy behind enemy lines on a secret mission. It is a way of transforming his fear of the unknown into a game he can control. The highlight of the week is when a letter arrives from their parents in London. Mrs. Pearson reads it to them after dinner. The letter is full of love and longing, but also of the grim realities of life in the Blitz. Their mum writes about the air raids, about the rationing, about the neighbors whose house was hit. She tells them to be good children, to listen to the Pearsons, and that they will all be together again soon. Arthur tries to be brave for Molly, but at night, in his bed, he sometimes cries silently into his pillow. He misses the smell of his own house, the sound of his father's laugh, the feeling of his mother's hug.
In the evenings, the family gathers around the wireless to listen to the news. Arthur listens intently to the reports of the air battles over Britain. He imagines his dad, who is an air raid warden, out in the smoky, dangerous streets of London. He feels a mixture of pride and terror. He is safe here, in the quiet, dark countryside, but his parents are in danger. It is a heavy burden for a 10-year-old boy to carry. As he gets ready for bed, Mrs. Pearson comes to tuck him and Molly in. She tells them a story, a local folk tale about pixies and giants. Her voice is soft and comforting. He's starting to feel a genuine affection for her, for this kind woman who has taken him into her home. But it is a borrowed comfort, a temporary peace. Lying in the darkness, he can hear the hoot of an owl, a sound that once seemed scary but is now becoming familiar. He thinks of London, a city of fire and noise so far away. He is caught between two worlds, the one he has lost and the one he has not yet fully found. He is a boy waiting for a war to end, waiting to go home. He closes his eyes and dreams of the rumble of a train that will one day take him back.
A merchant sailor on an Atlantic convoy ship. The world is a circle of gray, churning water meeting a gray, indifferent sky. For a merchant sailor named Thomas, this is the entire universe. He is an oiler on the Star of Glasgow, a rusty, nondescript freighter carrying a cargo of munitions and grain from Halifax, Canada to Liverpool, England. It is the winter of 1942, and the North Atlantic is the most dangerous place on Earth. Thomas's ship is part of a slow-moving convoy, a herd of 50 vulnerable merchant vessels guarded by a handful of corvettes and a single aging destroyer. They are the lifeline of Britain, and they are the primary target of the German U-boat wolf packs. Thomas's day is governed not by the sun, which is rarely seen, but by the ship's bells and the relentless demands of the engines. He is on the 4 to 8 watch. He is woken in the pitch black of the forecastle by a rough shake of his shoulder. The air is cold, damp, and thick with the smell of diesel oil, unwashed bodies, and stale cigarette smoke. He dresses quickly in his oil-stained overalls, his movements sluggish from a sleep that is never deep enough. He makes his way down a series of steep, narrow ladders into the belly of the ship, the engine room. The engine room is a vision of hell. It is a cavern of noise, heat, and ceaseless motion. The massive diesel engine throbs with a deafening rhythmic power that vibrates through the steel floor plates, through the soles of his boots, up into his bones. The air is suffocatingly hot and thick with oily fumes. His job is to keep this beast alive. He is an oiler. He moves through the narrow, treacherous catwalks, his oil can in hand, lubricating the dozens of moving parts of the engine. He checks gauges, listens for any change in the engine's rhythm, any sign of trouble. The work is repetitive, greasy, and requires a constant, focused attention. A moment of carelessness could mean a serious injury, a broken arm caught in the machinery, or worse. The noise is so loud that communication is impossible except through hand signals. He is part of a small, tight-knit crew in the engine room, men from Glasgow, Liverpool, and Cardiff. They are not naval sailors. They are civilians, merchant seamen. They are not fighting with guns, but with wrenches and oil cans. Their work is unglamorous, but without them, the ship is a dead hulk, a sitting duck. There is a strong, unspoken bond between them, a camaraderie forged in the shared heat, noise, and danger. After 4 hours, his watch is over. The bell rings and he is relieved. He climbs back up from the engine room, his ears ringing, his body slick with sweat and grime. He emerges onto the deck into a world of breathtaking cold. The wind howls, driving icy spray across the deck.
The ship pitches and rolls in the heavy Atlantic swell, a relentless, sickening motion that has become the normal state of being. He makes his way to the mess hall for a meal. The food is plain but hot, a stew of indeterminate origin, bread and strong black tea. The men eat in a greasy, smoky fug, their conversation a low grumble. They talk about football, about their families, about what they will do with their pay when they get ashore. They rarely speak of the U-boats. To speak of them is to invite them. The fear is a constant, unspoken passenger on the ship. During his off-watch hours, there is little to do. He might try to read a dog-eared book or write a letter home to his wife in Glasgow, a letter that he knows may never be delivered. He describes the sea, the weather, the other men. He doesn't describe the fear. Mostly, he tries to sleep. He lies in his narrow, damp bunk, the ship groaning and creaking around him, the engines a constant low throb beneath him. Sleep is a shallow, restless state, easily broken by the slightest change in the ship's motion or the sound of the alarm bells. The real terror of his life is the constant, nerve-shredding vigilance. Every man on the ship is a lookout. Thomas spends hours on the deck, wrapped in every piece of clothing he owns, staring out at the endless, empty sea. His eyes ache from the strain, from the salt spray. He is searching for the almost invisible feather of a periscope, the white wake of a torpedo. The sea is a vast, menacing wilderness, and he knows that beneath its gray surface, the wolves are hunting them. One afternoon, it happens. The alarm bells clang, a frantic, terrifying sound that cuts through the ship. "Action stations!" a voice bellows over the loudspeaker. Thomas's heart leaps into his throat. He runs to his assigned station, which is part of a damage control party. On the deck, there is a controlled chaos. The naval gunners on the ship's small deck gun are scanning the horizon. The corvettes, the little sheepdogs of the convoy, are racing through the water, dropping depth charges. The explosions are a deep, muffled whoomp that vibrates through the hull of the ship. Thomas looks out and sees it. A column of black smoke and orange flame on the horizon. A tanker, 2 columns over in the convoy, has been hit. It is a horrifying, mesmerizing sight. The ship breaks in two, its bow and stern pointing to the sky for a moment before sliding beneath the waves. It takes only a few minutes. He sees a few tiny figures in the water. He knows their chances of survival in the freezing Atlantic are almost zero. The fear is a physical thing, a cold, metallic taste in his mouth. He is on a floating bomb, carrying thousands of tons of explosives. If a torpedo hits them, there will be no time for lifeboats. There will only be a sudden, violent annihilation. He grips the railing, his knuckles white, and waits. The corvettes continue their deadly dance, but the U-boat is gone, vanished back into the depths. The convoy steams on, leaving the wreckage and the dying men behind. It has to. To stop is to become a target. A gap has appeared in the neat lines of the convoy, a space where a ship used to be. The mood on the Star of Glasgow is now grim, subdued. The men move with a quiet, fatalistic resolve. The jokes and the easy banter are gone. They are all acutely aware of their own mortality, of the thin steel plates that separate them from the cold, dark water and the enemy that lurks within it. The next few days are a blur of tension and exhaustion. Thomas goes about his duties in the engine room, his senses on high alert. Every clang of a wrench, every shudder of the ship sends a jolt of fear through him. He barely sleeps. He just waits. And then one morning, they see it.
A smudge on the horizon. Land. The coast of Ireland. A collective, unspoken sigh of relief seems to pass through the ship. They have made it. They have run the gauntlet. As they steam up the Mersey towards Liverpool, the sight of the land, of the buildings, of the other ships is the most beautiful thing Thomas has ever seen. The city is scarred by bombing, but it is solid, it is real, it is safe. When the ship finally docks and the engines are shut down for the first time in 2 weeks, the sudden silence is deafening. Thomas stands on the deck, his body still swaying with the ghost motion of the sea, and breathes in the air of home, an air that smells of coal smoke and wet pavement and life. He has survived, but he knows that in a week he will have to do it all over again. He will have to sail back out into that gray, cold, deadly ocean. He is a merchant sailor, and this is his war.
The day in the small, palm-fringed village begins with the humid heat that rises with the sun, a damp blanket that settles over the nipa huts and the dirt paths. For a young woman named Elena, a teacher, the day is a delicate balancing act, a performance of compliance that masks a quiet, fierce act of cultural survival. The Japanese Imperial Army has occupied her island for over a year, and their presence is a constant, oppressive weight. The schoolhouse, a simple wooden structure with a thatched roof and open sides, is still standing, but its purpose has been subverted. Elena wakes on a woven mat on the floor of her family's hut. She helps her mother prepare the morning meal of rice and dried fish. Her father, the former village headman, is now a man forced into a silent, watchful subservience. He says little, but his eyes are full of a deep, sorrowful anger. Before Elena leaves for school, he puts a hand on her shoulder. "Be careful," he says in their native Tagalog. "Remember who you are." It is his daily reminder that her real work is not what it appears to be. She walks to the schoolhouse, her simple dress clean and neat, her long black hair tied back. The village is quiet, its usual vibrant energy suppressed. The Japanese soldiers from the nearby garrison patrol the paths. Their arrogance and their rifles are a constant threat. The villagers bow, their faces impassive, masks of deference. Elena does the same, her heart cold with a resentment she cannot show. At the schoolhouse, she must first raise the flag, not the beloved sun and stars of the Philippines, but the red circle of the rising sun. She must do this every morning, a small daily act of humiliation. Her students, a group of children of various ages, arrive. Their faces are thin, their clothes often patched, but their eyes are bright and curious. The official curriculum, dictated by the Japanese military administration, is designed to indoctrinate them. They must begin the day with a bow towards the east, towards Japan and the emperor. They must sing Japanese patriotic songs, their young voices struggling with the unfamiliar words. They must learn the Japanese language, Nimpongo, from textbooks that praise the glory of the Greater East Asia co-prosperity sphere. Elena must teach this. She must stand at the front of the classroom, her voice calm and steady, and repeat the phrases, write the characters on the cracked slate blackboard. It is a performance. If the Japanese inspector, a stern man named Sergeant Watanabe, makes one of his surprise visits, she must be seen to be a diligent and obedient teacher of the new order. But Elena's real teaching happens in the moments between the lines. When she teaches them Nimpongo, she will quietly compare the Japanese characters to their own ancient Bibayan script, reminding them of their own rich linguistic heritage. When they read the Japanese-approved stories of obedient children and heroic soldiers, she will, in a low voice, tell them a traditional Filipino folktale after the lesson is over, a story of a clever trickster outwitting a powerful giant, or a tale of a brave hero defending his village. The children understand the subtext. The giant, the oppressor in the story, has the face of the occupiers. In their history lessons, she is supposed to teach them that the Americans were cruel colonizers and the Japanese their liberators. She follows the textbook when she has to, but she also tells them stories of José Rizal, of Andrés Bonifacio, the heroes of their own revolution against Spain. She tells these stories in hushed tones, as if sharing a precious secret. She is planting seeds of memory, of identity, of pride. She is fighting a battle for the minds and souls of her students. She is ensuring that they do not forget who they are. The most dangerous part of her day is when she teaches the forbidden subjects. In the late afternoon, when the day is hot and the soldiers in the garrison are sleepy and less likely to patrol, she will bar the door of the schoolhouse and teach them in English. English has been banned, a symbol of the hated American influence. But for Elena, it is a language of resistance, a connection to the outside world and the promise of liberation. She has a few tattered English language books hidden beneath a loose floorboard. She teaches the children the words of the Gettysburg Address, of the Declaration of Independence. The words liberty and freedom are spoken in whispers in the hot, still air of the classroom, but they resonate with a powerful, explosive force. This is her true work. This is her act of defiance. At midday, the children eat the small portions of rice they have brought from home. There is little to go around. The Japanese have seized most of the crops and the fishing boats. The people are hungry. Elena often shares her own meager lunch with the thinnest children. She sees the war not just in the soldiers and the flags, but in the hollows of her students' cheeks. After school, she walks home, her mind still buzzing with the tension of the day. She is always afraid of a surprise inspection, afraid of a student innocently repeating a forbidden word, afraid of a collaborator in the village reporting her. The punishment for such defiance would be swift and brutal, but her fear is outweighed by her sense of duty. She is a teacher. It is her job to nurture, to enlighten, to protect. In the evening, she helps her family with their work. They tend a small hidden garden in the jungle behind their hut, growing sweet potatoes and cassava to supplement their diet. This garden is another secret, another small act of resistance against the forced starvation of her people. As dusk falls, the family gathers in their hut. The world outside grows dark and quiet, but the jungle is alive with sounds. And sometimes there are other sounds, whispers of guerrillas in the mountains, the Hukbalaha, who are fighting back. Her older brother is one of them. She has not seen him in months. Every night she prays for his safety. The whispers of the resistance are a source of both hope and terror. Hope that they will one day be free, and terror for the fate of those who fight. She has a small hidden radio, a primitive crystal set her brother made. At night, under a thick blanket to muffle the sound, she presses the single earphone to her ear, straining to hear the faint, staticky broadcasts from the voice of freedom, coming from Australia or a secret transmitter somewhere in the islands. "I shall return," the voice of General MacArthur promises. The words are a lifeline. She will share the snippets of news she hears with her father, who will then quietly disseminate them to the trusted elders of the village. Information is a weapon. Hope is a weapon. Lying on her mat in the darkness, she thinks of her students. She thinks of their bright, eager faces. She is teaching them to read, to write, to count. But more than that, she is teaching them to remember. She is the keeper of their culture, the guardian of their story. In a small, forgotten village on an occupied island, in a simple wooden schoolhouse, this young teacher is fighting a quiet, desperate, and profoundly important battle for the future of her nation.
The world, for Jean-Pierre, is a place of meticulous order, of microscopic precision.
It is a world viewed through the magnifying loupe strapped to his eye, a landscape of tiny gears, polished jewels, and hair-thin springs. He is a watchmaker in a small town in the Jura Mountains of Switzerland, a place where the air is clean and sharp, and the silence is broken only by the gentle ticking of 100 clocks. It is 1944, and just beyond the snow-capped peaks that frame his valley, the world is tearing itself apart. But here, in the neutral heart of a continent at war, life continues with a quiet, predictable rhythm, a rhythm measured by the steady beat of an escapement wheel. His day begins with the first light of dawn, illuminating the tidy, prosperous town. He lives in an apartment above his workshop, a place that smells of clean oil, old wood, and metal. He prepares a simple breakfast of fresh bread from the local boulangerie, cheese from the valley, and strong coffee. He eats at his workbench, a massive, worn oak desk that has been in his family for 3 generations. As he eats, he looks out the window at the peaceful town square. He sees his neighbors going about their business with a calm, unhurried air. It is a scene of almost surreal tranquility, a pocket of the 19th century surviving in the middle of the 20th century's greatest cataclysm. After breakfast, his work begins. He is not an assembly line worker. He is a master craftsman, an horloger. Today, he is working on a complex chronograph, a commission for a wealthy client in Zurich. The work is slow, deliberate, and requires an almost meditative concentration. He disassembles the intricate movement, each tiny screw and lever placed in a specific order in a shallow brass tray. He cleans each part in a special solution, then inspects it under his loupe for any sign of wear. His tools are as delicate as a surgeon's instruments. His hands, large and strong, move with an astonishing gentleness and precision. The world shrinks to the millimeter of space in front of him. The war, the chaos, the death, all of it recedes, replaced by the pure, logical beauty of the mechanism. The predictable, perfect interaction of gears and springs is a comfort, an anchor in a world that has lost its reason. But the war is not entirely absent. It is an echo, a vibration felt through the solid rock of their neutrality. It comes in the form of the newspapers, which he reads during his lunch break. The Swiss press is carefully neutral, but he learns to read between the lines. He sees the maps, the arrows showing the Allied advance through France, the desperate German counteroffensives. He feels a quiet, cautious hope. The war also comes in the form of refugees, a trickle of desperate people who have made it across the border, with stories of horror that seem to come from another planet. And it comes in the form of business. The demand for high-quality Swiss watches has never been greater. They are a stable store of value in a world of collapsing currencies. He has clients on both sides of the conflict, a fact that troubles his conscience, but is a reality of his country's position. In the afternoon, as he continues his delicate work, he listens to the radio. He can tune into the BBC from London, its signal crackling but clear enough to hear. The calm, authoritative voice of the British announcer brings news of the front, a perspective untainted by German or Vichy propaganda, which he can also tune into, a jarring contrast of triumphalism and hate. He also listens to the Swiss national broadcast, a careful, multilingual ballet of neutrality. The radio is his window to the inferno. He hears of the fighting in Italy, the relentless bombing of German cities, the vast, grinding battles on the Eastern Front. It feels both immediate and impossibly distant. Sometimes the war is more than just an echo. On a clear day, he can hear it. A low, deep, continuous rumble from the north, beyond the mountains. It is the sound of Allied bomber formations, thousands of them, flying high over Swiss territory on their way to targets in Germany and Austria. The sound is a terrifying, awesome thing. He will go outside, stand in the street with his neighbors, and they will look up at the sky. They see the tiny silver crosses, leaving long white contrails against the deep blue canvas of the sky. Sometimes they see a stray plane, damaged and trailing smoke, trying to make it to the safety of a Swiss airfield to be interned. Sometimes they see a dogfight, a brief, violent dance of planes far above them. It is a terrifying spectacle, a glimpse of the war's reality, a reminder of how close they are to the flames. He has a nephew in the Swiss army, part of the country's massive citizen militia. The army is in a state of constant readiness, guarding the borders, the tunnels, the mountain passes. The national strategy, the redouit, is to retreat to a fortified redoubt in the Alps and make an invasion so costly that no one would attempt it. Jean-Pierre feels a quiet pride in this, in their determination to defend their small, mountainous democracy. But he also knows how precarious their safety is. They are an island of peace by the grace of geography and by the calculation of the warring powers. In the evening, after a long day hunched over his workbench, he closes his shop. He might take a walk through the quiet streets or have a glass of wine with a friend at the local inn. The conversation is always a careful dance. They talk about local affairs, about the quality of the recent cheese production, about watchmaking. They will touch on the war, but with a certain reserve, a feeling of helplessness, and a strange, almost guilty gratitude for their own safety. They know they are living in a bubble, and they are afraid it might burst. Later, in his apartment, he sits in his armchair, a clock he made himself, ticking steadily on the mantelpiece. The sound is the heartbeat of his life, a testament to order, patience, and craftsmanship. But tonight, he can hear another sound, carried on the wind from the north, a faint, distant rumble. The sound of artillery from the fighting in Alsace, just across the border. It is a low, persistent growl, the sound of a beast, just outside the door. He closes his eyes and listens. He is a man of peace, a maker of beautiful, intricate things, but he is surrounded by a world of destruction. He is a neutral man, listening to the echoes of war, praying that the sound never gets any closer.
The day for 14-year-old Hans begins not with his mother's call, but with the shrill, piercing blast of a whistle. It is still dark outside his family's apartment in a working-class district of Munich, but the day for the Hitlerjugend, the Hitler Youth, waits for no one. He swings his legs out of bed, the floor cold beneath his feet. He dresses quickly and with practiced efficiency in the uniform that is his second skin. The black shorts, the brown shirt, the swastika armband. The uniform makes him feel strong, important, part of something bigger than himself. He is a small gear in the great, powerful machine of the new Germany. He eats a hurried breakfast of dark bread and ersatz coffee, his father already gone to his job at a nearby factory. His mother watches him with a mixture of pride and a quiet, unspoken anxiety that he doesn't understand. He sees only her smile of encouragement. Before he leaves, he clicks his heels together and gives her a crisp Heil Hitler. She returns the salute, her own a little less sharp than his. He runs down the stairs and joins the other boys from his building, all dressed in the same uniform, all with the same eager and serious expressions on their young faces. They march together through the streets to the local HJ headquarters for morning roll call.
Their boots make a loud, satisfying, rhythmic sound on the cobblestones. They are a river of brown shirts flowing through the pre-dawn city. At the headquarters, they line up in neat, precise rows in the courtyard. Their squad leader, a stern 17-year-old with an iron cross pinned to his chest for his service as an anti-aircraft auxiliary, inspects them. He checks their uniforms, their polished boots, the shine on their belt buckles. Perfection is expected. Discipline is everything. They stand at rigid attention as the swastika flag is raised, their right arms outstretched in the salute, their voices shouting the morning pledge of allegiance to the Führer. Adolf Hitler, we are yours. The morning is dedicated to physical training and pre-military drills. The war is not going as well as the newspapers claim. Hans can sense it in the hushed, worried conversations of the adults, in the increasing frequency of the air raid sirens, and the training for the boys has become more intense. They practice crawling under barbed wire, their elbows and knees raw from the rough ground. They learn to throw dummy grenades, their instructor barking at them to put more force, more aggression into the throw. They learn to read maps, to assemble and disassemble a rifle, to identify enemy aircraft from silhouettes. The games they used to play, capture the flag, tug of war, have been replaced by these grim rehearsals for combat. Hans feels a thrill of excitement during these drills. He's being trained to be a soldier, a defender of the fatherland. He daydreams of being sent to the front, of winning his own Iron Cross, of making the Führer proud. Lunch is a simple, hearty soup and bread, served in a noisy mess hall. The boys eat quickly, their conversation loud and boisterous. They boast about their prowess in the drills. They trade stories about their squad leaders. They sing patriotic songs. The songs are full of words like blood, soil, honor, and victory. They sing them with a passionate, youthful fervor. The atmosphere is one of intense camaraderie, of belonging. For Hans, the HJ is his real family. His friends, his leaders, they understand him in a way that his parents do not. They share the same ideals, the same purpose. In the afternoon, the focus shifts to ideological instruction. They sit in a classroom, the walls covered with posters of the Führer and heroic German soldiers. Their leader, a charismatic young man from the party, gives them a lesson. Today, the topic is the Jewish question. He speaks of the Jews as a poison, a threat to the purity of the Aryan race. He tells stories of their supposed treachery, their control of international finance, their role in Germany's defeat in the Great War. Hans listens, his brow furrowed with concentration. He has heard these things all his life, on the radio, in the newspapers, from his teachers. The constant repetition has given them the weight of truth. He feels a sense of righteous anger towards this unseen enemy, a sense of duty to help protect his people from them. He does not know any Jewish people, not personally. They are an abstraction, a concept, a threat to be eliminated. After the lesson, it is time for their community service. Their squad is assigned to a scrap metal drive. They go from door to door with a large cart, collecting old pots, pans, fences, anything made of metal that can be melted down and used for the war effort. Most people donate willingly, eager to show their patriotism. Hans feels a sense of importance, of contributing directly to the victory. He is not just a boy, he is a vital part of the home front. As evening approaches, their day of service is not yet over. Their squad is assigned to auxiliary duty at an anti-aircraft or flak battery on the edge of the city. These batteries are now largely manned by boys, freeing up older soldiers for the front. Hans's job is to help carry the heavy shells for the massive 88mm guns. The work is strenuous, and his arms ache from the weight of the shells. But he feels a surge of pride as he stands beside the huge guns, looking out over the darkening city. He is a defender.
He is part of the wall that protects his home from the enemy bombers. Tonight, there is an air raid. The sirens begin their terrifying wail, and the sky is filled with the sweeping beams of searchlights. The British bombers, the Terrorflieger, are coming. The flak battery explodes into a frenzy of controlled action. The commander shouts orders. The guns begin to fire. Their roar a deafening, concussive blast that shakes the ground. The air smells of cordite. Hans works with a frantic energy, hauling the shells, his fear eclipsed by the exhilarating, terrifying thrill of the battle. He sees a bomber caught in the searchlights, a silver fish in a net of light. He sees the flashes of the shells exploding around it. He shouts with triumph when the plane is hit, when it blossoms into a ball of orange flame and begins its long, slow fall to the earth. He does not think about the men inside. He only thinks of victory, of one less enemy to threaten his city. When the all-clear sounds, the boys are exhausted, their ears ringing, their faces smudged with gunpowder. But they are exhilarated. They have faced the enemy, and they have won. They are heroes. Hans walks home through the blackout streets, his body aching but his spirit soaring. He feels like a man. He has done his duty. He has served his Führer.
A factory worker in Detroit on the final day of the war, 1945. The morning of August 14th, 1945, begins like any other Tuesday for Grace, a line worker at the Willow Run bomber plant just outside Detroit. The 6 a.m. alarm clock jangles, and she rolls out of bed in her small, neat room in a government-built dormitory. The air is already warm and humid, promising another sweltering Michigan summer day. She shares the room with another girl from Tennessee, and they move around each other in the small space with a practiced, silent choreography. They dress in their work clothes, sturdy slacks, a plain blouse, and a bandana to tie back their hair. There's no time for a leisurely breakfast, just a quick coffee and a piece of toast in the bustling, noisy cafeteria before they board the bus for the plant. The bus is packed with other workers, a cross-section of America that has been drawn to Detroit by the promise of good wages and patriotic work. Men too old or unfit for the draft, young men waiting to be called up, and women, thousands of women, who have traded their kitchens and department stores for the factory floor. The conversation is a low hum of gossip, complaints about the heat, and talk of the news. The first atomic bomb was dropped on a place called Hiroshima a week ago. Another one fell on Nagasaki a few days later. No one is quite sure what an atomic bomb is, but it sounds terrifying and powerful. And there are rumors, persistent whispers, that the Japanese are finally ready to surrender. But they have heard rumors before. For now, there are bombers to build. The Willow Run plant is a place of overwhelming scale. It is a mile long, a city under one roof, the heart of what President Roosevelt called the arsenal of democracy. Grace walks through the massive doors and is immediately hit by the familiar wall of sound, the deafening roar of machinery, the high-pitched scream of drills, the percussive thunder of the riveting guns. The air smells of hot metal, grease, and ozone. She finds her station on the assembly line, the line that produces the B-24 Liberator bombers. Her job, for 8 hours a day, 6 days a week, is to install the wiring harnesses in the cockpit section. It is intricate, demanding work. She handles dozens of colored wires, following a complex diagram, her fingers nimble and sure. She has been doing this for 3 years. She can do it in her sleep. The work is monotonous, a series of repetitive movements performed over and over again. Connect the red wire to the terminal, tighten the clamp, solder the joint, move to the next one. The massive fuselage section moves slowly down the line, and she moves with it. She knows every inch of this small section of the bomber. She feels a strange sense of ownership, of pride. The planes she helps to build are flying in the Pacific, fighting the war. She has a brother in the Navy, serving on an aircraft carrier. She often thinks of him, hoping that one of the planes she has touched might be protecting him. The work is not just a job, it is her connection to the war, her contribution to the fight. She works alongside a woman named Betty, a mother of two whose husband is in Europe. They don't talk much over the noise of the factory, communicating mostly with nods and gestures. But there is a bond between them, a shared understanding. They are Rosie the Riveters, the women who are helping to win the war. They are doing a man's job, and they are doing it well. Lunch is a 30-minute break in the cavernous, crowded cafeteria. Grace and Betty eat their packed sandwiches and talk about the rumors. You think it's true? You think they'll really quit? Grace just shrugs. I hope so. I just want Charlie home. They talk about what they will do after the war. Will they keep their jobs, or will they be expected to go back to being housewives? The future is a big, uncertain question mark. For now, the whistle blows, and it's back to the line. The afternoon is long and hot. The air in the plant is stifling, despite the huge fans. Sweat trickles down Grace's back. Her feet ache. Her mind drifts. The rhythm of the work is hypnotic. She thinks about the dance she went to on Saturday night, about the letter she needs to write to her brother. The war has been the central fact of her adult life. She can barely remember a time before rationing, before newsreels of battles, before the constant low-level anxiety for loved ones overseas. And then something changes. A different sound cuts through the familiar roar of the factory. It's a murmur at first, a ripple of excitement that starts at one end of the massive building and spreads down the line. People are looking up from their work, talking to each other, their faces animated. A foreman is running down the aisle, waving his arms. The assembly line, the unstoppable river of steel, begins to slow down. Then it stops completely. The sudden relative silence is shocking. And then the factory's main whistle begins to blow. It is not the familiar short blast that signals the end of a shift. It is a long, continuous, triumphant scream, a sound that echoes off the high ceiling and fills the entire space. People start to cheer. A few people at first, then more, until the entire factory is a sea of shouting, weeping, hugging people. Someone has a portable radio, and they turn it up as loud as it will go. The announcer's voice is crackling with emotion. An official announcement from the White House: Japan has accepted the Allied terms of surrender. The war is over. The words hang in the air for a moment, and then the place erupts. Strangers are hugging strangers. Men are crying without shame. Women are laughing and sobbing at the same time. Betty throws her arms around Grace, and they just hold each other, tears streaming down their faces. "He's coming home," she whispers over and over again. "He's coming home." Grace thinks of her brother, safe now, and a wave of relief so profound it makes her knees weak washes over her. The work is forgotten. The tools are dropped. People start to stream out of the factory, pouring into the bright afternoon sun. The celebration spills out into the parking lots, the streets. Car horns are blaring. People are dancing, singing. It is a spontaneous, joyous, chaotic explosion of emotion, a release of 4 years of pent-up fear, anxiety, and grief. Grace walks through the celebration in a kind of daze. She sees the bombers on the assembly line, half finished, silent. An hour ago, they were the most important things in the world, the weapons that would win the war. Now, they are just machines, relics of a conflict that has suddenly, miraculously ended. Her job, her purpose for the last 3 years has vanished in an instant. She feels a strange mix of euphoria and a dizzying sense of uncertainty. The war is over. What happens now? She finds her way back to the bus. The ride home is a raucous, joyful party. She gets back to her dormitory to find the celebration in full swing. Music is blasting, people are dancing in the hallways. The world has been turned upside down. She goes to her room and sits on her bed, the noise of the party outside a happy, distant roar. She takes out a piece of paper and a pen. She begins to write a letter. Dearest Charlie, the war is over. You're coming home. The words look beautiful, impossible, perfect on the page. For the first time in a long time, the future feels like not a threat, but like a promise.